Hello, everyone. Welcome and good whatever moment of this April 1st you are enjoying on your time zones. I can't believe it's already April, but here we are kicking off the first day of our 3-day HR Technology and Digital Transformation Summit. My name is Minola, although Starbucks disagrees with me on a daily basis, so call me Hacking HR and I will gladly reply. And it is such a joy to welcome everybody in the audience. I see comments already coming in, so we know that we are up and running technology-wise. We have an amazing lineup for today, and today is all about the state of HR technology in 2025. And we will be talking about emerging trends and technologies and looking into the HR landscape. We have Jessa backstage taking super good care of us, and I will ask her to bring up the panelists. And while they settle into their Zoom boxes on our screen, I will just continue to welcome people and anticipating a question, one of our most popular questions. Yes, these conversations are being recorded. So make sure that you follow us on LinkedIn and check our platform out, hackinghrlab.io, and you will be up to date with all the goodies that the wonderful Hacking HR team has been cooking for us. Now, let's try to make the most out of our very short 40 minutes together today. And let's maybe kick it off with a short round of introductions and also a question just to get our tech juices running. So I will pass the e-mic around as you appear on my screen clockwise, and just shortly introduce yourselves. And if you were to define the state of HR technology now in one word and one word only, what would that word be? I will give you a few more seconds, just enough to encourage everybody in the audience to consider not only this question, but the entire conversation open for them as well. Use the chat generously, and I am super curious to see your one-word definitions for the state of HR technology in 2025. So, Richard, welcome, and it's so good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you, Manola. Happy to be here. So to kick it off, my name is Richard Hinton. I'm the VP Head of People at Assembly OSM, and we are a prefab modular construction company. So we use high fidelity modeling to build out affordable, sustainable housing. I'm located right here in New York City. So I'm really excited to be part of this panel. I love HR technology. I think right now for 2025, the word that I'm going to use is thrilling.
Thrilling. Okay. Jamie, good to see you. Welcome.
Good morning, good afternoon. Hello, Manola. It's wonderful to be on a panel with you again. Happy to be here. My name is Jamie Conrad. I'm the current VP of People and HR at Trust Radius. We're a small B2B SaaS organization in the tech sector. We help people make buying decisions around business technology. And so this is a topic that is close to my heart in multiple different ways. And I'm looking forward to the conversation. I think for me, the word that immediately came to mind was transformative.
Transformative. Thank you. I do see a lot of words coming in from the chat as well. Everything from groundbreaking, enhancing, blooming, thrilling, but also competitive, fragmented, and overwhelming, critical, and everything in between. Renuka, it's so good to see you. It's been a hot minute. We can't get your audio. Not yet. Shall we go agile, not fragile, and ask Mark to step in, and then we will loop you back in? So Mark, welcome. Good to have you on our screens.
Thanks, Manola. Hopefully you can hear me. Good to be on the panel and to be here with everybody. Mark Edgar, I'm the Chief People Officer for a Canadian company called Wajax. We're an industrial distribution company based in Toronto. So good to be with everybody. I'm from the UK originally, as you can probably tell from my dulcet tones, and also co-founder of an HR community called Future Forward. But looking forward to the conversation. I think I'm going to cheat a little bit because my word is going to be hyphenated. There's kind of two words. And I would say the term I'd use is hyped up. I think that was what I'd use for HR technology at the moment.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much. Renuka, let's see how are we on the audio front? No? Okay. Let's do this. So I guess that was the universal language for I will jump back in, and let's see if that works. So while we create a bit of space for Renuka's technology to decide to use its powers for good today, maybe I will just launch the first question to the panel and to the audience, and that is, what are some of the trends that you see emerging in our HR world? And I'm interested in, the big ticket items, but also extra points available for any subtle trends that you see and you would bet on them bubbling up stronger and stronger. And just a bit of a spoiler alert, there is a slice of our panel today on AI. So if we can also bring other topics into the conversation, that would be wonderful. And I will just leave the question there, and let's see who has trained for the unmuting competition, and we will take it from there.
I'll take it.
Jamie!
Some of the trends that I think we're seeing outside of AI, and maybe including AI, is AI is not just focusing still on operational. It's starting to move into that more personalized experience from the employee experience side, which is really exciting. I also think that we're seeing a focus on this continuous listening to help us enhance the data that we have, enrich the data that we have. There's a trend around, using AI for synthesis of information and figuring out employee sentiment, but it's starting to evolve now more into a listening ecosystem rather than just being there as available to synthesize information. And then another part that's really close to me is the manager enablement as a tech category itself. So we're starting to see more technologies emerge that are specific around enabling our managers to be better leaders. And as an extension of an HR department, not just a standalone tool. So having those tools available, and they're being created in a way that help us build out that ecosystem of our HR tech stack. So those are some of the ones that come to mind pretty quickly for me. And I think that the common thread in all of them goes back to that personalization in the workplace. What we're seeing that's important, and what we've heard for years and didn't know how to operationalize, was our employees want that personalized experience. They want to be able to show up as their whole selves, and we need to be able to support them as their whole selves and meet them where they're at. And so our tech is finally starting to catch up with that request and that desire and that need in the workplace. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, can I jump in? I love that. I agree with Jamie. A lot of personalization. I also am really excited about a lot more skills-based kind of personalization that's coming out within HR. So within AI. So looking at the skills that you have within your workforce, helping to define what development plans look like, what internal mobility looks like, what workforce planning looks like, as well as hiring as well. So I think that's a really cool trend. Also, I think many organizations are probably looking at fewer tools and looking for more consolidated platforms that have a deeper integration and that are a bit more integrated with other tools as well. But I'd say a bit more of a better user experience. So better focus on user experience, fewer tools, deeper integration, I think is another trend I'm seeing.
Thank you. Mark, would you like to jump in?
I was wondering whether we'd test Renuka's mute, but
we'll get there in a second.
Okay. More anticipation for us. I think they're great points from Jamie and Richard. I love all of those thoughts, and I'd agree. I think maybe just a couple of things to build on. One, I think, is this fascination around productivity that we have. So kind of doing more with less. I think, which I think is, starts in many ways in our personal lives and people thinking about how they can get kind of more done. We know that time is the only kind of finite resource that we have these days. So this fascination we have with trying to do more with less, I think, is certainly making its way into HR teams. And I think that's providing opportunities for us to find different ways for integration of these technologies to create more efficiency, which is exciting, and seems to have gone so far beyond the old concepts of single sign-on and those sorts of things. So trying to create more integration, which I think hopefully will allow us to create much clearer analytics and insights. I think, in my mind, I think there's still a long way to go on that, but I think there's lots of opportunity that integration creates to allow us to have more insights around what's going on. I think that ties in with Jamie's point around kind of ongoing listening, etc., and being proactive in that space. So yeah, that's some of my thoughts.
Thank you. Welcome back, Renuka, and you will have 2 for the price of 1. So you also have the first question to answer, and you've kept us curious, not furious, as to who you are, your one-word definition, and the trends that you see.
Fantastic. I'll give you my name. You can see it on the screen. It's Renuka Iyer, and I am I serve as the Executive Vice President and Chief People and Culture Officer here at Pharma. We're a trade association of pharmaceutical manufacturers. Well, definitely the conversation that is being had in the United States about medicine and access to medicine, we're right in the thick of it. And our staff are super busy with everything that's going on in this environment. I want to think about the one word that you asked us, and how does my one word align with this question? So the question about current trends, I think for me, I'm going to add another additional word to the one word and call it purposeful alignment. That's how I see all of the, the information technology kind of supporting the people function. And the reason I say that is the trends I see is that the technology is getting more and more sophisticated. I think Mark talked about insights. Really converting information to insights is happening. Is HR, paying attention? Are we able to look at those insights and bring the predictive analytics to our business leaders? That I think is the trick. So for HR to ride the wave and take advantage of this information that's being converted to insights, and how do you take those insights and make predictions based on what's happening in the business is a skill that needs to be developed. And I think we should continue to demand the integration. I know we talked about single sign-on and other things, and I know some companies still struggle with some of that. I think better integration with our IT colleagues is super helpful. But I certainly see that happening. Purposeful alignment is my word.
I see what you did there. You saw Mark's hyphenated word and you raised your 2-word label. That's great. I see a nice crescendo to our panel. But Mark, I'm gonna come back and collect on your hyphenated word. I would ask you to lead us into the next slice of our chat. Like, with everything that, happened around AI, all the hopes and fears and expectations and dreams, how much has it come to live up to all the hype it created?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Manila. I think I certainly can only speak for myself in feeling a bit, and I see the word in the chat, feeling a bit overwhelmed by the hype and the opportunities that appear to exist. I think it's worth remembering that AI has been around for actually a very long time in certain formats. So we're used to that being used to send us various recommendations and being used to basically support some of our attraction strategies for a long time. So the kind of introduction of perhaps generative AI has been the thing that's really accelerated over the last couple of years. But it just strikes me that there's so many opportunities that we talk about, but the reality of my day-to-day job, the day-to-day job of my team that work here at Wajax in the Canadian operation is still pretty immature. And I don't think that's necessarily because we're not willing to look at opportunities. I think there are plenty of opportunities that we are exploring, but I think just the reality of trying to translate those into something that's practical and is going to really support the business is important. And maybe the final thing I'd say on that is I think one of the challenges we have is that we haven't done a very good job, or we don't seem to do a very good job of defining the problem that we're trying to solve. So we get excited by the technology, and we're quite right to get excited about the opportunity. But in terms of actually stepping back and thinking, well, what's the problem we're trying to solve here? And is AI the right tool to support that? I think that's where we can and then start to identify better use cases than perhaps we have been able to this point.
A lot of energetic nodding in support of these insights.
I'm sure we'll disagree with my thoughts on that, but it's kind of where I'm at. I'm trying to be pragmatic about it without being come across as being a bit of a technophobe or anything, because I'm certainly not. But I think we have to be realistic about where we are on this journey, and it's still relatively early days. And I think as HR leaders, we will get inundated from suppliers promising the earth. And perhaps not necessarily being able to deliver on that. So, but curious to hear what others think.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm in alignment with that, and to take it, and go in a little bit different direction. That hype, we get inundated with the sales reps and the sales calls, as Mark was saying, and there's a lot of opportunity, and there's so much emerging tech happening all at the same time. But when I go in and lead roundtable discussions with other HR executives, there's still a good chunk of people that haven't even started thinking about AI in their HR department and their operations. And so to be impactful, I think, AR technology vendors, they're going to have to pivot how they think about approaching HR professionals. We've seen a lot of adoption in the recruiting side and in AI enablement for candidate screening and sourcing, performance feedback. We've started to see some AI there, but there's still a lot of HR executives that are hesitant, and they're asking those hard questions, not just the ones that haven't, but the ones that have as well. Like, is this hype worth it? Is this HR technology going to solve the business problem? Is it going to create transparency in our organization, or is it just going to create confusion and have another round of change management that I'm going to have to navigate through? Are we enhancing trust, or are we eroding it with what we're trying to do? So being really crystal clear on that business problem that you're trying to solve for is critical in deciding, which of all of the thousands of emerging technologies that are coming out right now, which one's going to be the best fit for your organization at the time that you're trying to solve for that business problem and have the most impact.
Yeah, I'd love to add on to what Jamie and Mark had said as well. I think I was one of those HR folks that was like, I was like, I don't want to do with AI. I don't want to deal with any of this. This is a little too much. I'm not even going to touch it. Like, give me some space for a second. And then I took a step back and I realized that I already was operating with AI. So I kind of, had to really, dig into it and figure out what exactly I was doing, how this was playing out with the rest of my workforce. But then I think I really kind of unlocked this curiosity that I had of, what's this all about? How can I leverage this? How can I get a little bit more curious with it? How can I also try it on, pilot it, bring people along with me as well? And I think all the different types of vendors that have come, approached or what have you, I try to talk to all of them, to be honest with you, because I feel like I can learn something different, or even if it's a little tidbit here or there, I can learn something from the way that they're thinking about it, or the strategy, or how they're building out a product. So I've remained really, really curious with it. But at the same time, I say curious and cautious. I love that you said curious and furious, Manola. I'm going to steal that one too. But I stay curious and cautious at the same time too, because I do also fear a lot about the governance around it as well too. But when looking at different vendors and stuff like that, I really kind of go after the relationship, but more focus on the outcomes that the product is going to bring versus all the bells and whistles. I feel like there's so many different tools and shiny objects that kind of, vendors try to, really grab our attention with. I think if I could really kind of solve a solid business issue, or, there's some real solid business outcomes from it, I'm a bit more apt to kind of test it out, pilot it, and try it on and dig into further curiosity.
I can jump in as well with some of my thoughts, which are further along. I could say that I'm a pro AI mindset. That's where I'm operating. So, based on my experience in HR, I've always found that there were times when I was working for the system versus making the system work for me. And over the years, I've learned that instead of working for the system, make the system work for you. And that means you're, talking to your vendor, demanding that the system has certain capabilities and continuing to be on it, right? And because we know when a software lifecycle is happening and they're introducing new features, it's going to take a while. So making sure that you continue to stay on that course and demand of the system what is needed. I think there are a lot of benefits with AI. I come from a different country. English is not my first language. And therefore, just to even have the ability to communicate in a clear, concise manner, especially at a time when, there's just so much happening in the world. There is, people lack attention. So instead of writing a paragraph, can I write 2 to 3 sentences and still communicate exactly what I want to be done and communicate from a behavior standpoint? I think AI will help. AI is also, it's machine learning, and it's becoming better. I think I've noticed maybe even 2 to 3 years back how AI was being introduced. Even a simple tool like ChatGPT has come such a long way. So really taking advantage of that, I would say that some of the aspects we've begun to implement, we're seeing speed and quality. Oftentimes, speed and quality don't go hand in hand. They say when you want quality work, slow down. But I think AI allows you to have the speed along with the quality in how you present your work. Now, at the heart of all of this is the HR intelligence, and that only humans can bring, right? Our lived experiences doing HR and dealing with people and being able to separate out the support that's needed for staff, the supports that's needed for managers, for leaders, and really bringing that intelligence to bear. I think at the heart of it would be that's critical. If that's not there, then we'll be working for the AI system. If you want the AI systems to work for you, then begin and keep that at the core, your HR experience. When you keep that at the core, then I think the systems do work for you. I've at least where I work, there's we're definitely leveraging the wave of AI. I encourage all my teams to, do their work and also run it through AI so they'll know how, whether it's doing it better or not. And we're seeing some success.
Mm. The thing that I love best about these Hacking HR panels is that they feel like such a kaleidoscope of insights and different levels of comfort with something or another. But I did see a few comments in the chat around fear of being replaced by AI, and the only thing that I would like to add to this is a saying that has been going around for some time, that you will not be replaced by AI, but you will be replaced by people who use AI most proficiently and meaningfully. And listening to what you just shared, you made me curious about something, and I was trying to come up with wording it the best way. So bear with me. I'm speaking while I'm thinking, and that's not always a good thing. As you see decision being made around you, and quite probably you are part of those decisions around what technologies to invest in and how to build the HR landscape for the future, what are some of the things that you see and you have to address as misconceptions, misperceptions, misexpectations from the technology. What are some of those points in the conversations where maybe you have to take half a step back and, what is it that we're trying to address, back to your earlier point, Mark? So can you give a few examples of conversations that people in the audience can then recognize in their surrounding reality, where they can step in and really bring meaningful challenges and meaningful reframing to the table? And would you like to jump in, Jamie, and lead us into this?
Sure. I think when I think about the HR technology, and I think about buyers specifically, and us as buyers, I have to go back and question that vendor and the vendor relationship. And Richard said that he listens to a lot of different vendor pitches, but I think we have to see through those vendor pitches. Trust isn't built on vendor pitch decks, on product demos, on fancy features. It's built on consistency. It's built on transparency. It's built on a courage to show up with that human-centric mindset. And going back to Mark's mention of doing more with less, as a vendor, you also need to understand that you're talking to the leader that usually has the smallest budget, the least amount of resources, the smallest team. And so we have to be hyper-focused as HR executives on how we're partnering with our tech stack and the HR vendors that we're choosing to partner with. And we're not so caught up in those fancy features. We don't have the luxury of, a couple of flash features that are going to maybe be fun for 60 or 90 days and then fall flat. We have to be very thoughtful and strategic in our planning process around when we adopt, why we adopt, who we're partnering with, and how that's then rolled out. And the manager enablement and the employee experience is highly considered in those decisions. And so what does true partnership look like between you and that tech vendor? And how are you bringing the best of that technology to your organization that helps to promote your core values, that helps you to achieve your strategic goals? It's less about those fancy features, because those features are going to be there, and then in 60 days they're going to either be gone, replaced, evolved, and we're on to the next thing. And so you're talking to the people, as if you're a HR tech vendor, you're talking to the people. And so that relationship, trust, the transparency, those are things that are meaningful to us in multiple different areas. And so that would be some advice that I would give to tech vendors right now.
I can add to that too. I also think just kind of what Renika was saying as well is just reminding folks that HR is the center of it, and HR is the judgment decision maker kind of a thing too. It's using AI and these tools as tools, not as the end all be all, or this is going to define. I think I get a little bit worried with folks getting too reliant on automation, and that almost taking over human judgment kind of thing. So I think reminding folks that HR will stay close to this and the role that we play in that. But I also think people probably are fearful of it because of like security and safety too. So maybe also just really being very transparent about the security, the guardrails that you have, what the governance looks like, how you're protecting folks' information. I think that also will help folks kind of come along a little bit way when we're looking at HR trends and the advancement of technology, specifically in HR and even globally. I think I'd say more transparency and clarity.
I can jump in as well and bring an angle to this. You talked about misconceptions. That was the question. And, I still hear about this replace it people. Can AI replace people? Do I even want to try it? I don't know if I want to. I don't think I'm great with technology. These are all the kind of, this is the kind of language that I've heard people talk about and kind of distance themselves from AI. And I know, Minola, I think you said it well. It's not that that AI is going to replace jobs, but people who leverage AI are going to have an edge. And so I'm thinking about some HR frameworks that are already in place in organization development work. Think about psychological safety, right? We all know about psychological safety. We've talked about it multiple times. Now let's implement it on ourselves in this conversation around AI. So what are the different levels of psychological safety? We all know the first level is join the conversation, a seat at the table. That's the first level. Then there is learner safety, there's contributor safety, and then finally challenger safety. I'd say take the same approach to AI. So if you've not, if you are one of those people that are a little hesitant to even think about AI, don't want to go into the conversations about AI, the first step is join the conversation. Read up. There's a lot of material out there. In fact, these AI tools themselves will give you material if you ask them. Join the conversation, which is the first step. Then begin to learn, right? Begin to learn about the large language models. How do they work? What does machine learning mean? And it's not very different from how humans learn. It's just that it is learning at a much faster pace and is able to retrieve the information because it's a computer and not necessarily humans. And so there's get familiar with that learning aspect. And then, of course, begin to contribute. And your contribution comes in the form of using the tools. Because when you use the tools, you're allowing the machines to learn from themselves, to learn from the prompts that you give it. So that is how you can contribute to making AI stronger for HR. And then finally, you can then get to the challenger phase where you're pushing back to AI and saying, hey, no, looks like you got the facts wrong, go correct yourself, right? So I'd say there are so many tools and in our toolkit in HR and organization development work. I'd say use some of those tools, and I just called out one, but we can use some of those tools to get familiar with AI and really experiment with it, because once you've run a couple of experiments, you know whether this is for you or not. And I'd say, this is the time to ride the wave and be friends with your IT folks, because they are the ones that can make sure that security is taken care of and that the boundaries for the organization is already there. And then you can leverage the tools. You can tell them and challenge them about, hey, this tool doesn't really work for me. Copilot, is that great? Can we get another tool? But having those conversations with your IT folks, IT leaders is, I think, critical.
Mm.
Yeah, I love that insight, Renuka. I think great idea to kind of use the frameworks that we're familiar with, and it feels like it ties in with Jamie's point earlier around the importance of change management. Minola, I think the kind of question as you asked the question, what I was thinking about was a kind of practical situation we had here a year or so ago, where we were looking at a new platform to support our ATS, our talent acquisition process. And we invested a lot of time thinking about a new solution, which was pretty sophisticated in terms of how it was leveraging AI. And as we went through that process, we kind of got to the point where it just felt too much too soon for the organization where we were at. So the maturity of our processes weren't necessarily there. The sophistication of some of our leaders wasn't there in terms of hiring for us to feel as though that was the right thing for us to invest in. So we paused, we bought ourselves some time. We've gone through more of a process of piloting some smaller initiatives rather than looking at the whole end-to-end process. And it might get us to the same point, but I think it'll get us to the same point in a more sustainable way. So I think some of the kind of points around change management and change readiness, how ready is your organization for this new thing, which happens to be technology in this case, I think is an important consideration.
Yeah. Love that point, Mark, because remind me of something that I speak about every day in my full-time job. And that is something that, for lack of a better word, I called change dysmorphia. And what are the misalignments between our perceptions and where we think we are or the organization is in terms of genuine change appetite. And, sometimes I do believe that we bite off more than we can chew, whether that's in technology or something else. I see you unmuted. Do you want to jump back in?
Yeah, I think just to agree with you, Manola, because I think one thing is the kind of appreciation of where is your organization at versus where are you at as an individual. So I love Renuka's point about being having a pro AI mindset, and I think if you have that, that's amazing. But organizations, what mindset does the organization have, and how do you shift that to make sure that you are aware of that change? I think is a really important point to make.
Yeah.
I just want to add real quick that, innovation without empathy isn't progress, it's a disruption, right? And so balancing innovation and change management with employee readiness means sometimes resisting that urge to move so fast and choose that shiny object. But how is this, how is it meaningful? How does it improve how people experience and work with it? We can't, too often that's part of the problem is you rush to implement this great tool that you think is going to solve this problem, but you forget to do the hard work, which is the human side, and humans are hard, and we can't overlook that aspect of change management for building that cross-functional adoption to have the biggest impact that it can absolutely have. And so that, going back to the comments around psychological safety and being part of the conversation, those are so critical. But if we don't do the hard work of preparing people to trust and adopt the tool is meaningless.
Yeah.
I just wanted to include, there's a comment in the chat that I thought was interesting, and I thought I'd just answer to that. How the data is structured, or how it is in shape within an organization, is also very important. Depending on how you're using AI within HR, it's incredibly dependent on the data maturation, and not a new discussion with machine learning and automation. Absolutely, yes. I think when I started here in this organization, we had disparate HR systems, and that was just not working because we needed staff to go to one system for benefits, another system for something else, another system to go check their pay slips. It just didn't work. So what we did, the first step in the process was to integrate all the systems. And that's why purposeful alignment, I'm kind of going back to those two words, being very sure of, being very confident about what is it that you're trying to do. You're trying to make the system work for the organization. So starting where the organization is, but keeping the future on the radar, and painting that picture of where you'd like to go could be super helpful. In our organization, we're undertaking a revamp of our intranet, and one of the many features that our IT leader is championing is to move as much as possible away from PDFs and go into web pages, so that when you install a bot to just quickly search the data and be able to get you information on your T&E policy, maybe sometime later in the night, just after having dinner, you want to go and find out how much was that per diem again, and you just quiz the system. You want that information even without reaching out to your HR person or someone in accounting. So keeping that in mind, keeping the longer term vision in mind, and making space for technologies that support that longer term vision, whether you get there immediately or whether you get there one step at a time, will depend on the infrastructure within the organization. And I think that's where the human intelligence is brought, right? Because HR looks at it from all different angles. And so bringing all of that together, bringing diplomacy, and making sure that change is happening at a pace where you're bringing everyone along and not just running off to the races, I think is important.
Yeah. It is incredibly painful to say that we are 2 minutes away from wrapping this one up. So I will squeeze in one rapid question. And my request to you is, make it a punchline or even a word. As you encourage people to make more curious, bolder decisions when it comes to HR technology, is there one skill that you recommend them to get better at? And it might be outside of the usual circle of suspects. So one skill, sadly, we don't have time for explanations. We will do counterclockwise. I will give you a few seconds to think about, just as I will share a quote that you reminded me of. and that is Oren Harari's The Electric Light did not come from the continuous improvement of candles. And I think it also applies to technology. You can't expect electric light by continuously improving what you already have. But at the same time, if your appetite is for the cleanliness and predictability of continuous improvement, then don't have expectations of breakthroughs. So, Mark, what is your skill that you want to encourage people to develop?
I love that quote, Manola. I'm going to steal that with pride. That's amazing.
Please.
I think my word and ties in with a question I saw from Kathy Eastwood in the chat, just around the role of HR. I think HR plays a critical role. So I think the skill I'd look for HR leaders to develop would be influence.
Influence. Thank you. Renuka.
Bold experimentation. This is the time. Go for it.
Wonderful. I see that you're in the 2-word punchlines mindset today. Jamie.
Just because we're talking about tech doesn't mean that we can get away from empathy. So when you lean into tech, keep the empathy first and foremost.
Wonderful. Richard.
Sure. I love that Jamie said empathy. I had a feeling she would say that too. So I'm going to say learning mindset. I'll use 2 words.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Richard, Renuka, Jamie, Mark. It's been a joy. Thank you, everybody in the audience. Stay tuned. My colleagues are coming up with amazing conversations. And if you enjoy this, please also make sure that in addition to saying thank you to our speakers, you say a big thank you to the Hacking HR team behind the buttons. They make this happen. So thank you, everyone. Have a lovely April, and I will see you again tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to day one of the Hacking HR April Summit, which is HR Technology and Digital Transformation Summit. We're only on the second panel of the day, and I can already tell you it's going to be a fantastic week. I'm Sneha, head of events at Hacking HR, and I'm so glad to be moderating this conversation for today, which is the building a digital HR strategy, developing comprehensive strategies to integrate technology into HR functions. And we have an amazing lineup of speakers, each of them bringing hard-won lessons on digital HR transformation. Please join me in welcoming Shipri Narhar, Amy Tawny, Malvika Jetmalani, Melina Gillies. Thank you so much for joining us for this amazing panel. And I would like you to introduce yourselves, make a quick intro, and we can just dive into our panel.
In any specific order you want us to start in?
Just a quick intro. We can jump into the panel once we have it all introduced to our audience.
Perfect. So I'll get started. So hi everyone, my name is Shipri Narhar. I am the Global Head of People Transformation Programs and Analytics for Entain Group, which is one of the largest sports betting, gaming and gambling operators across the world. We operate in just over 40 countries and we employ about 30,000 people globally. I lead anything to do with people experience design, HR transformation strategy, covering technology implementations, operating model redesign, and anything that we do in the world of HR. And recently, and I say recently, it's been 9 months now, so maybe not that recently anymore, I've picked up people analytics and connected that into the journey of everything that we're doing in making sure that we're staying on top of our game when it comes to digital HR transformation and our vision for the future.
Thanks, Cyprian. I'll go next. Hi, everyone. I'm Melina Gillies. I'm Chief People and Experience Officer here at Flex Networks in Canada. We're a facilities-based internet service provider, so well within the tech space. I am also founder of Revolution AI, which is an HR-based education and consultancy for adopting AI into organizations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Happy to go next. Hi, everyone. I'm Malvika. I'm a 3-time CHRO and the founder of Atvis Group, which is a human capital advisory firm driven by the core belief that to win in the marketplace, businesses must first win in the workplace. And I'm coming to you from Chicago today. Good to be here.
Great to have
Hello,
you.
everyone. Good day. I'm Fabio from São Paulo in Brazil, South America. Pleasure to stay here with you all in the audience one more time. A couple of years, large experience in global matrix, in design, implemented across HR solutions to build the correct and well strategy in this matrix. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you, Fabio. Nice to see you on the panel.
Thank you, Sneha.
And hi, I'm Amy Tawny. I'm the Senior Vice President and Chief HR Officer for UT Health San Antonio, and excited to be in this discussion with this esteemed panel.
Thank you so much, all. It's amazing to see splendid people on the panel today. And I would like to start with a simple question that most of our audience would be interesting to hear from you. In today's rapidly evolving world of work, what does a comprehensive digital HR strategy even look like? I would like to break the silence.
I'm happy to kick us off on this one, Sneha. Thank you. So I think a modern digital HR strategy is more than just implementing technology. It's about making sure that you're aligning your digital strategy with your business and your workforce needs. I have a model that I call the SAGE model when I think about what a good modern digital HR strategy looks like. So the S stands for scalability. So the ability of the digital strategy and tools to adapt to your changing business needs, to your headcount changes, whether it's through low-code solutions or plug-and-play integrations or flexible workforce management. The world, I think, is changing so fast that it's important to have something scalable so that you're not locking yourself into solutions that can't grow with your business. The A stands for AI and analytics. It's 2025, so we have to talk about AI. It's the law. And so that's all about leveraging predictive analytics for talent management, workforce planning, your employee engagement insights. The G is for governance and compliance. So it's important to balance innovation with security and ethical practices, including ethical AI practices and data privacy. And then the E stands for employee-centric design. So prioritizing user experience, and whether it's through AI-powered self-service tools or automation or mobile accessibility, this also means that prioritizing an integrated tech stack and not having disparate systems where people have to log in to multiple different things just to access their information. So I like that SAGE model because I think it's a good reminder that a true digital strategy is not just about tech, but it's about enabling smarter, faster, and more human-centric HR practices.
I love that.
Following Malvika, I guess so. It's a sure agreement, 100%. But deeply, we see and saw very common when a company decided to, as example, to build a HCM environment, including global payroll, development, all the suites in this matrix. Past 1 year or 2 years, for any reasons, the company decided to move it to another provider, to another provider, to another provider. Obviously, we guess along a few hours or days to discuss the reasons. But my intention is this: what the companies need, from the systems. How Malvika said, outputs, inputs, NI, obviously, data analytics, HR analytics. But however, guess the companies need to heard and provided a deeply assessment for we can see and visualize how the right way to follow, not just I'm not satisfied for this provider and I needed to, or we decided to move to another provider, but what the right reason, what do we need deeply? This is my comment.
Cool. I can pick up next, and from my perspective, I think sometimes the word comprehensive is a bit scary because you're expecting to think about everything else that hasn't crossed your mind yet when you're thinking about your digital HR strategy. What we've seen potentially work well for organization of my size as well, and balancing almost my experience of in-house and consulting, I see more and more work being done with the business and the business model in mind. So what is the type of business and organization that we want it to be, and where are we heading as an organization, and almost like trying to picture the multiple different scenarios of 5 years from now, which I know sounds a bit more impossible today with the evolution of AI and technology rapidly growing beyond some of our expectations. But trying to build that scenario of what is the organization 5 years from now, with the multiple scenarios assigned to that. What type of HR do we want it to be as an organization? So where does HR fit within that operating model? Is it support? Is it strategic? Is it driving some of the experience elements? Is it supporting us in location strategies and anything else that we're planning as part of that? And then we can design exactly what's this strategy that we're talking about, tools rather than being led by technology, so still being led by business on 3 different layers. So one, we can look at experience and what does experience look like in today, but also how we're designing it for the future, how we're designing it for all of our employees and workers. So expanding just beyond what we traditionally think about people being employed for the organization. We're looking at data and intelligence as data is evolving rapidly, and with the advancement of technology, there's data piece that we're taking into consideration for our work. And thirdly, but maybe the most important element is ways of working. So how are we ensuring that digital is embedded within how HR partners with the business and drives strategy forward? How do we want that ways of working to be amplified across the organization, whether it's automation, insight, adaptability as part of our strategy? And that almost gives you the vision of building some of that comprehensive HR strategy elements. Obviously, much more work to happen beyond that of giving it legs and arms and a body and being able to run by itself. But that's as much as I can share in 2 minutes.
I think that's a great point, actually, Cyprian. And you know, it's certainly in the HR world, like how many times have we built 5-year plans where we have to pivot or we have to change along the way, right? We can do what we can to sort of anticipate what the future will look like. And I think the best thing HR can do with any sort of tech stack is not just considering, you know, the adoption of the digital tools that we want to bring forward now, but how do we culturally develop skills development that will continue on, and kind of that culture of like adaptability and change capability, and how do we build that in as an HR department to other areas of the organization that keeps an organization ready for change when you do need to pivot to a new technology because your plans change.
I think the topic's been well covered. The only thing I would add is just starting outside in. And so with our recent digital transformation that we're still in the process of implementing, we're looking at all of our stakeholders that we serve. So patients and students and community, as well as our own employees and our workforce. So just building on everything that everyone said is what are all of the digital components that have to be connected, so we create the right experience. So if we're super clear about our mission, how we're supposed to deliver things and what we're here to do, and then in addition to that, all the outcomes we want, then we are building infrastructure for the future that will allow us to connect all of the different systems to serve all of our stakeholders.
Thank you, everyone. That was amazing. While we still have Amy on the conversation, being a Senior Vice President and Chief People Officer, from your experience, what has shifted in digital HR strategies compared to earlier transformation efforts?
So I think my other panelists have touched on this. It's really about starting with the employee at the center. And so if we're completely clear about what we're on to deliver as far as for our customers or our consumers or our stakeholders, then we want to position our employees well to be able to do the things they need to do and have access to the data that they need to make the right decisions, and in creating the right culture. So the processes should mirror your culture and how you want to get things done. And so for us, that is a key focus.
Yeah. I think what's interesting, and thank you, Amy, sorry. I think for me, and I would make it only one point to this question, which is a great question. I think the priority largely in digital transformation has moved from like, you know, automation, making things better, faster, making things speak together, to augmentation, right? And I think we need to be prepared to kind of lead that transformation into like, how do we better augment our work? And that's using like AI to help us make decisions and things like that. So it's a subtle shift, but it's a really, really important one, I think, in how we, especially in HR and with employee-facing tech stacks, can really look at how do we get from automation to augmentation, and what does that look like in our organization from a policy perspective?
That's perfectly said. And I wanted to add I think one of the things that we've seen systemically across HR transformations and this digital space is our span of being able to deliver and clarify scope for the future has shrunk down significantly. So before you would have started an HR transformation program and you would have said already lined up of that 4 years transformation journey. We're now more of 4-year vision, 1-year roadmap, sometimes even shorter than 1-year roadmap. So what is it exactly that we have clarity that we need to deliver within the next 6 months? And I think that's part of the continuous evolution of how we're moving away from a one-off program into a vision, and then multiple programs that consolidate us and almost like feel like building blocks or like a puzzle that you're building to build into that vision. And to your point, we're no longer digitizing static processes. We're looking at are we enabling the workplace to be fluid, global, hyper-personalized, bringing consumer-grade technology and like mobile apps that almost compete with everything else that is in a handful of employees. So we're already thinking differently from almost like just implementing something of enterprise technology and leaving it in there. And with that sort of almost like mindset in mind, we're redefining what does success look like. In maybe when I started in consulting, success was we've deployed something and it's live. Now we're looking at what are the type of behaviors that technology and tool and digital adoption is bringing into the organization. Is it driving the right behaviors? We're like getting significantly more in like behavior science of are the colors right? Is it sending the right prompts? Are the prompts pulling people in or are they pushing them out? And we're talking significantly more of like bringing the scientist from HR into some of these elements and rather than just deploying and turning on a technology. And I think as HR leaders, we've started thinking differently as well. So we're not necessarily thinking about almost like a plug-in and a new tool. We're starting to think of ecosystem and interconnected ecosystems of technology and tools and organizations and how things talk to each other. And we're feeling more like product owners these days rather than almost like running technology and implementing it. So we're constantly thinking about how we're evolving and what are the needs and how we're responding to those from an HR perspective. So I think it's all like a continuous evolution. And if you ask me the same question a year from now, the answer is probably going to be different.
That's awesome. Okay.
I think this idea of bringing consumer grade user experience to the employee experience is an important one. I think so many people are living what I call the Jetsons life at home, and they come to work and log into their digital workplace tools and feel like they're living the Flintstones life. And, you know, we've had AI for a while now in our consumer experience. If you buy a book from Amazon, for example, it'll give you recommendations on, you know, what other people who bought this book also bought. And we are now getting to a place where in the employee experience journey, you're going to start to see similar things. It's going to become very, very personalized. So if you have an employee that pulls up the parental leave policy, perhaps the AI bot or agent might say to them, hey, employees who looked at this policy also reviewed the childcare benefits. Would you like me to serve those up to you? And I think that is where we are headed, is super hyper personalized employee experience. And I think that's what people are going to start demanding from the digital workplace.
But I think it's already here. It's already in demand. If not, will happen in the future. We have so much data about our people. Why can't we deliver some of these experiences customized to their needs?
Awesome. So as we've covered the first area of topic, I would love to jump on to the next one, which would be how can you leverage data insights to shape your digital HR roadmap and elevate the employee experience?
Hi, Sneha. So I guess we get back to the basis. So even in global matrix or regional, my current position, I am a Brazilian, local Brazilian, not a global matrix, a country bank. So I found here a big systems, but they don't use 100% of the capability. So something was implemented, but 80% or 90% not well or not implemented in the past. So my point is, guess so far we can visualize data quality, you know, for the other areas properly in HR, for the another areas in your organization to consume this right data, quality data. Guess we back to the basis. So invest in time in training, learning in HR properly, in the time of the in designing pre-project, obviously pre-designing in the right way, in the way of the project, and after they go live, to ensure that the people involved in the project write the all acknowledgement about the system, the connections, for we can prepare these people to don't use it anymore because it's real. Guess so in other countries or the rest of the world, still use the spreadsheet, the Excel. So it's so hard in Latin America. In previous my experience across all Latin America, we still don't have this capability of 100% capability to understand in the use the systems to us, not against to us, but to us properly, So I guess it's super important to invest in acknowledgement in the right project management mainframe, including all documentation, reserve this documentation, because in my current scenario, I don't have almost 100%. I don't have this documentation, so it's so hard. We invest many effort, but if you look back to the past, if this company had this matrix and following the right steps, I guess so we have another and good scenarios.
I think that's super important. And the question of data, I think, is a really, really interesting one. And to your points, Fabio, in terms of, there's an element here where we need to meet people where we're at, right? Because at the very heart, this is still a human system. And, I think we all need to remember and have at the root of our solutions, like data gives us trends, but employee voice gives us truth, right? Like we need data, and we need great data to kind of identify some of the friction points we're dealing with, but we need to validate what we're doing from a technological perspective through employee feedback loops, right? And one of the ways that we can do that is, if you're going to track a KPI, or if you're going to have a technology solution to give you some sort of data, pair it with a human outcome, right? Like if you're looking at time to hire, compare it with like hiring manager satisfaction, right? And how does your technology help you get there, right? And it's kind of like a delicate like balance and marriage of the two.
All great points. I would add, I think it's important to have data governance and make sure that before you set out on these large scale digital transformations or AI transformations, that you have the right data. And if you need to scrub the data, take the time to do that, because if your data that you're inputting into these systems is not correct, obviously your output is not going to be great. That's the non-glamorous part, but I find that it's so important to do that before you set out on a transformation like this. I think it's important also to keep in mind transparency. So communicating to employees how their data is being used. People are much more educated now on data privacy and their rights to understand how their data is being used. And I think it's also important for us, most of us are HR leaders here or HR adjacent. I think we're going to have to be the ones at the decision-making table to say that we need to use people analytics for good. So if we're using predictive analytics for things like retention, well-being, career growth, that's fantastic. But if we're starting to track keyboard and mouse activity, to track who's putting in how many hours, and using outdated industrial era management tactics to performance manage people by using the data, then we need to consider the ethics of that. And the other thing I'll say is we need to understand the importance of human centricity and the difference between lagging and leading indicators. So when you look at data and you're looking at turnover data, for example, it's great. It's a fantastic metric to look at. Who's leaving and why, which departments, which countries or regions, et cetera, years of tenure. But turnover is a valuable metric, but it's a lagging indicator. So if you want to look at leading indicators, then you start to look at things like engagement trends or sentiment analyses, or to Melina's point, the qualitative stuff, right? Do the focus groups, the skip level meetings, the AMAs. Those are equally important because they help you understand the why behind the data.
I think that the data question is quite complex. So in no organization that I worked for or I've consulted with, everyone has ever told me that they are so proud on the data mapping and the quality and the accuracy of the data that they have. So I think that that's one is an ambition maybe that as organizations, societies and organizations, we will never get right of. Data will always have issues as we're processing through it. I think part of our exercise is how do we separate what is good data and what is bad data? Well, I don't want to get started in sort of the ethics of how we're utilizing it, understand exactly of are we measuring what matters to us as an organization and as people functions? Are we looking at the type of things of answering key questions that we'll care more about? So some of the examples that you've had already are around, we don't know what productivity is, therefore we're measuring the wrong things. We don't understand what engagement is, therefore we're measuring like surface level elements in our organization. So we're not asking almost like the breaking down the questions and understanding how organizations work of what are the moments in the employee life cycle that breaks trusts and slows productivity for our people. Whereas HR function or as organizations or as management styles, we're creating friction instead of value. So where are we actually shifting the dynamic between our relationship with employees and our people, rather than looking at sort of almost like surface metrics? Can we go a bit deeper and understand maybe not just sentiment analysis, because sentiment analysis is something that changes day in and day out, but actually aggregate enough information to allow us to understand what is actually happening in the organization and how we're driving things. Where is the experience fragmented? Where are we looking at pain points that we're driving in the organization? And then define and decide exactly of what are the type of metrics that we would want to see and what does success look like when we're looking at those metrics to understand where we're investing more time and effort. I think that the keyboard exercise is a perfect one of organizations not understanding productivity, because having someone just typing on a keyboard does not mean outcomes, does not mean output.
So one data point I would just add, just before we leave this conversation, is everything that has been said are excellent data points to look at, but we also need to look at external data. And so there's lots of resources externally that will inform like where to target for sourcing efforts, for strategic sourcing, if you're changing a service line and you need to seek out different talent. And then there's just market sensing and other data factors about who you're serving as far as your customers. And I think just coupling that with everything that's already been said is critical in shaping that roadmap.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, everyone. Brilliant insights. Can't really agree more. And as we all know that there are so many tech vendors out there, and how can you go about selecting the right technology vendor?
I'm happy to kick us off on this one. The first thing, it's already been said, I think by Cyprian, but start with your business needs. Understand what problem you're trying to solve, because just lifting and shifting the technology is not going to work. I talk to a lot of CEOs and founders in my job, and I think there's unfortunately a lot of leaders out there who want to sort of stick the AI sticker on things and call it a day. So understand your business needs. Also, specifically with AI and so many vendors emerging with AI technology, be aware of AI washing, meaning vendors over-exaggerating their AI capabilities. So understand the next level questions to ask about how they train their models, what type of technology they use. Ask for referrals. Ask to speak to their current clients and understand what outcomes their current clients have driven by using their technology. I find that talking to references that vendors give you doesn't do much, because obviously they're going to give you their happiest clients who are willing to say good things. But find people who are using that same tool and ask them what their experience has been, including post-sales support. This is such a basic step, but so many people miss this step. And then understand the scalability and integration. So obviously the vendor should fit into your current ecosystem and your HR tech stack, then require more work and more overhauls and adding administrative burden. And then, other than kind of user experience, understand their take on ethics in AI. How do they think about having a human in the loop? Is their technology making the final decision? What safeguards are they putting in place to protect your employees' data? And are they compliant with regulations like GDPR, like the EU AI Act, et cetera? So understand and double click into those next level questions when you're selecting vendors.
And I'll add to that, because I like the sort of the structure that you gave there. We've moved away from just buying technology into looking for strategic partnerships, and we've said who are the best partners that we can bring on board to help us co-design the future for our organization rather than just deliver a system. So we're looking at strategic fit of, do they understand our business model? Can they relate to what we do? Do they share some of our visions and ambitions of what is the future of HR for an organization of our size and our complexity? We're looking at user centricity in design, and as someone who's been trained around sort of experience design, that is what we're starting with. So we're not starting with process or with technical requirements. We're starting with what is the experience that we want people to have across multiple systems and technologies, and then how do we design the process to support us and deliver that experience? We're looking at almost like openness and flexibility, and I think you've touched on this with some of the comments around the AI of how fast is the platform adapting, connecting, evolving? Are they like regularly updating? Are they always on almost like the front foot of trying to innovate and drive resolution? Or will I end up a year down the line when I've implemented this technology to already be outdated of what we're trying to deliver? And then there's the other element of partnership mindset of how much are they into the game of co-creating, co-partnering, co-designing with us something that is long-lasting, agile, and evolving, almost like creating a human being or something that is alive, rather than just designing a technology that is landed in the organization and switch the switch on.
Yes, another point important, it's about candidates and experience, it's very common. Obviously, guessing another panel, I mean that point that every day is new tools, new promises, new magic promises. So sure, checking in the market, in your context, the experience, but when looking about candidates' experiences, common, very, very common. We request to them fulfill it 10, 12 pages manually, So it's another point good to think, obviously, about designing connections and the hiring manager's experience and the recruiting people team's experience also.
I would just add, check the user community. That's usually a good place to find out how much they listen to the companies that use them and how much they innovate based on some of the other comments made, or do they solve the problems that are common amongst most users?
I think I would end off by saying all amazing points. When it comes to vendor partnerships, and I think partnerships being the operative word, I think what you do after launch matters almost more than what you do before, right? Like begin with the end in mind, and understanding kind of that integration and support and scalability that's going to happen with these partnerships afterward is very, very important. And to that end, I would say all of those things that Amy and Malvika stated on how to kind of clarify what great vendors are and what the options are available to you. It's really, really easy to build kind of an augmented and AI supported tool that will help you filter through all of that data when you have it, to help you have a really customized funnel of what is going to meet your needs. So don't be afraid to kind of play around with that technology as well to help you make that decision.
Thank you all. Thank you for the amazing insights. I wish this panel could go on for an hour more so that we could cover up a lot of different topics and insights. But as we are right at 5 minutes, I would love to close the panel with one important question. So, what's one lesson you've learned from your most recent tech implementation? If you could provide a very quick response, I think it would be really good.
Sure. I'm happy to start off, and I would say this is a great question, and I think it was Malvika, you had mentioned sort of like the Jetsons to like Flintstones, like, you know, in our life we're kind of living in that Jetsons world where things are changing very fast. And I would say, you know, the biggest lesson that we need to learn as HR practitioners and anybody doing digital implementation is that change fatigue is very real, right? Like we need to pace the change. We need to pace the projects that we're implementing so that that transformation doesn't overwhelm, because then we get shut down and lack of engagement and usage of whatever it is that we're trying to implement after the fact.
Investing more and more, how I said previously, in documentation, assessment, acknowledgement, you know, and understand deeply what the company expects us and what we need in HR, based in the any results of these needs, and discover how the best way to implement it and continue to efforts to have right data and right connections that we had in all company sides.
The lift and shift mentality is real, and so if you're trying to implement something new in addition to change in the data management components, I think you've really got to level set with stakeholders what they're going to get, and that it's really about configuration and not customization, and then just letting go of how it's set up versus what they're going to get as far as outcomes.
And I'm going to go back to one of my earlier points of we need to redefine what success looks like. So success for us is no longer of going live with technologies. It's about driving continuous impact into organizations. And that all, as an outcome, also shifts your mindset of we have a long term of project with a one go live or global deployment into more of iterative, evolving functions. So how many smaller deployments you're doing across a period of time to reduce change fatigue to the organization and drive this sense of continuous evolution that is a journey that people get bought into rather than something that you've just landed in the business and you allow the business to run with. So I think that's a great lesson for us to rethink transformations.
Yeah, and I would finish by saying, take a hard and honest look at your culture, because again, lifting and shifting technology is not going to solve culture problems, and understand that you need to evolve your leadership behaviors and tactics to meet the moment. In a quote that's widely attributed to Peter Drucker, he says, the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence itself, but to act with yesterday's logic.
I think that's well said.
Yeah, this is an amazing discussion, and yeah, trust me, I would have it for another long, and so does our audience. But as we are at the time, we'll have to close up. And thank you so much for all our panelists for authentically and generously sharing your insights, and to everyone turning in. Thank you for being part of the Hacking HR community. And we'd love to hear from you. Please share any feedback or testimonials in the chat about your experience with our Hacking HR events. And if you have any insights that you'd like to provide with today's panels, with the panelists. So your feedback helps us make better from each summit. And this is just the beginning. We are only on panel 2, and we still do have 3 more panels coming your way. So stick around and keep engaging. See you all soon.
See you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Hello and welcome, everyone. I want to take a moment to say this is day one, and I am excited to be here. I'm Renika Weston. I will be moderating a panel of distinguished HR professionals, and we'll be talking about HR technology, adaptation, can't even say that, and change management. So we are off to a great start. Had an opportunity to listen to some of the sessions earlier this morning. So I want to welcome everyone here. If you would put where you are calling in from, and if you have any questions related to this topic. So I want to welcome everyone. Let's see if we can get everyone in the room here, and then we can do introductions. See, folks should be zooming in just a moment. All right. Love to see all the smiles and wonderful faces. We've got Kristen, we've got Alex, Megan. Is it Saneem? Did I say that correct? Sanine?
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay.
And apologies, by the way. It was saying, I'm so sorry. It was saying that leveraging HR platforms and tools next.
Oh, that's right. Yes. I'm moving too far ahead. Yes. Sorry about that. Yes.
No worries. No worries.
Am I in the right place? So yes, exactly. For those of you who heard that, who caught that, I wanted to see if everybody was paying attention. It's leveraging HR platforms and tools, identifying and maximizing the value of leading HR technologies.
It's coming next, I guess, right?
If it makes you feel any better, I wrote them as well because I was like, wait, that's not what we're supposed to be talking about.
Wait. I want to keep you all ready. And then, so what I'd love to do is for each individual to just tell us where in the world are you calling in from and why is this topic so important for you? So let's see. Is it Kara?
Yes.
All right, Kara, why don't you go first and then we'll just go around the horn and everyone can just kind of quickly introduce themselves. And again, where are you calling from and why is this such an important topic for you?
Sure. So I'm based in Los Angeles, California. And I've always been in global roles, and technology and people and the mix together has always been a real passion of mine. So I really concentrate on transforming organizations from a people lens and how to utilize technology to the best of its ability. So, yeah.
All right. Let's go with Alex next.
Kia ora, everyone. I'm from New Zealand, so it's really early in the morning here. Look, I've spent probably the last decade looking at HRIS and then now on the AI Forum in New Zealand. And I think from a perspective of what technology will do for our profession, that's what really interests me. It's going to really push us into the next stage of us sitting at the exec table. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, I love that. The next stage of sitting at the executive table and not being asked to sit there, but we're actually the first person that they think about when the conversation begins. So I love that. How about you, Kristen? Want to introduce yourself? Where in the world are you coming from and why is this topic so important for you?
Oh, thank you so much. I am coming to you from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So we are still in the throes of winter up here, even though the calendar says spring. And I think this is probably one of the most important topics that we can be talking about with our leadership teams, because as the data comes in faster and faster and more is demanded, the systems that we use and how we leverage AI in that space will be extremely important.
Yeah, thank you. And Megan.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Megan, and don't let the accent fool you. I am Canadian, but I'm calling in from the UK. Great to join everyone here. And so my interest in this topic is that I've been focused on how we can use HR technology and emerging technology in HR to help us improve our practices in HR and across the business. And unfortunately, with no matter how much research I do, it keeps turning out that people play a bit of a critical role in the process, and understanding and helping them through change management practices and processes are critical to help us improve that adoption and usership level at the end of the day. And being able to provide that support to organization is key for HR.
All right. You know, we're not on the Zoom platform, and we did not have someone come in and just sort of Zoom bomb us. She was actually in the wrong session, which I'm actually in that session as well. So I was like, wait a minute now. It is early in the morning here in the DC metro area, but we actually are doing HR technology adaptation and change management, which is what I said in the beginning. I was like, wait a minute. So we had a panelist who was actually in the wrong panel. So you won't see her here. You'll just see the folks that are here today. So is everyone in the right space? Let's just confirm that. All right. Love it. Megan, you sure? All right. Well, I'm sure you will be ready for any of the questions that are asked. So I'm going to throw the first question out there, and love to see what you all think about this. So the question that I have is really around the strategies to help drive successful HR technology. So based upon your experience, what are some of the leading things you see out there from a transformational perspective? And again, whoever comes off mute would love to hear from you. So again, what strategies actually help drive HR technology adaptation? And then just based upon your experience, what have you seen to lead that type of transformation? Kara, if you have something.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the most important thing, in my opinion, is having that cross collaboration right from the beginning. So instead of looking at technology from an HR tech stack and what it can solve from an HR people perspective, which of course is important, if it's aligned with the business objectives and what really matters to the organization as a whole, and you can very early on get the right people in the room at all levels and have them involved for that cross collaboration between, finance, IT, operations. Of course, it's important to get the executive level buy-in, but even more importantly, it's important to get the buy-in through all stages, and especially that middle management. So to me, that's one of the most important things.
Okay. All right. Anyone else have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to, I think that's exactly right. I think one of the things that I've seen before is people not having a really well executed plan. And what I'm talking about plan is plan before the plan. How are you going to get the business case? What resources do you need? Properly resourcing it, waiting if you're not getting the resources to do things properly, being really systematic about it. And I think way too often we sort of get caught halfway through an implementation. You don't have enough people are doing it beside the desk, things aren't happening correctly, and it's not executed properly. So I think from a planning perspective, I know it sounds like the obvious, but they take a long time. So don't sort of jump off the course and get to another sort of fancy or fun thing. Just get it done once.
Yeah, I love that. Have you experienced any common challenges that come with tech adaptation? And that's for anyone that's on here.
I'll jump in here on this one. So to kind of further the conversation, totally agree with you, Alex, that plan and strategy and that role that senior leadership really plays, either the project sponsor and senior leadership plays in that and executing that plan. Too often, what I see is the focus on things like efficiency or bottom line thinking, where it's, this is going to save us money, rather than really aligning with that strategy and see where is this actually going to get us in 2 to 5 years, and that it's going to get us to where we need to be in tech, in terms of tech adoption, and having that strong leadership then that is able to build that plan and strategy and dedicate the real resources required. Because too often change management is what I see left to the wayside, or as Kara points out, it ends up being people with doing work on the side of their desk instead of really understanding what is the impact that's going to happen with this change, and being really realistic about it with people. Because otherwise then you get that change fatigue setting in, where it's just I don't know what's going on. Where are we going? What's the vision? What's the point? I'm just being asked to do all this extra work. Is this going to be permanent extra work, or are we actually going to see relief on the other side of it? So that's that role of leadership throughout the process, I think, is that common challenge, and that they understand what their role really is in the process.
Yeah, love that. When you talk about change fatigue, you can kind of see it. People, they have that kind of glazed over look. Or here in the States, there's a chain of donuts called Dunkin' Donuts. And there's a commercial that they show, and the gentleman sort of wakes up in the morning, it's 5 a.m. and he's doing the thing to get all us prepared, but he says, time to make the donuts. And so that feels like that fatigue, where it's like one thing after another after another. Kristen, I know you had come off mute. Anything to add to that before we move to the next question?
And I think just to add to what Kara said around making sure that you have alignment between the functions, HR needs champions who are not in HR. HR needs those champions outside of HR at that leadership level. Megan is absolutely correct. The leadership team has to be aligned. It can't just be the senior HR person pushing. I think the other piece around this is that sometimes from a change management perspective, we forget that HR does need a change management strategy, a plan, and needs to be taken care of just like we would typically take care of another function. So sometimes we just assume that everybody in HR can adapt, we can be comfortable playing in the gray, we don't need to do training because they know how to do that themselves. And we neglect, not even that it comes in at the end, we just neglect it because everybody in HR should know the change management steps. And so it not only impacts the implementation, but definitely the adoption.
Yeah, love that. And just the whole process of change management, because when you think about it, a lot of times the idea has been floated, right? And so by the time it floats how many levels this way to the left or down the organization, there is sort of this sometimes explanation or even excitement that loses its way. And when you think about the game that we play as kids, it's telephone. You tell a person, tell a person, tell a person. You still have to have the same amount of excitement. You still have to have the same understanding of the why it's important for the organization as you move this along. So thank you for talking about that and stating that that's so important. Just curious, when you think about, and this might be one for, let me think, because we were talking about this a little bit behind the scenes. So how should HR, and we may have talked about this before, but how should you align sort of this adaptation when you're talking about a larger transformation for a very large organization? Kara, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, or maybe Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the same thing. I mean, you need to think about it that we're an enabler and not thinking about necessarily the end, but how we're going to actually be able to get there and that it's going to be successful. I think especially the larger the organization, the more important it is to be aligned from a business objective standpoint, and even more so to have the right players in place. I think especially as there's been new tech, especially AI, which we haven't gotten to yet. But if you look at what that brings to the table, a lot of people are leading with fear. And I think it's one of the most important things that you have to address very proactively. It will exist. It doesn't matter what size organization you are, but especially within a large organization, people have fear about technology and what it means. And you can have all the best technology in the world, but if you don't have good process and people in place to be able to champion that, it's not going to be successful. So, thinking about what the outcomes are with that transformation versus, all the bells and whistles and which resonates with you more. It's really about what kind of outcome it's going to give that particular organization. And it's not a one size fits all, right? You really have to analyze for that particular organization and what are the pain points that people are living. So.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's why I think it's so important to be connected with individuals in similar industries, similar size organizations, and even larger and smaller, so that you could bring case studies to say, I know folks, who are in this industry and they're using this technology, or individuals with similar size organizations. And when they try to implement this technology, these might be some of the challenges that they face, or these are some of the things that we need to think about in our organization. I'm not here to promote anything, but I will use the word Workday. And I remember when Workday was the new technology. I can remember going from a paper system of vacation to going to Workday, and it was like, what if the system is wrong? And what if this and what is that? So there's so much talk now about AI, but there's so many other technologies and systems that we on the HR side have to be cognizant of, and thinking about that, people might be using a technology at home, but then what happens if they're using something different at work, or they want to bring that technology in? So again, the changes just keep evolving. So thank you for mentioning that we haven't even talked about AI, but there's still some people like me who can remember the day of, we had to go to vacations being in Workday. Like, I don't even like that. So anyone else want to add anything before we move on to the next set of questions? I'm so curious about your thoughts about a couple of things. Anyone else? No. All right. So we talked about some of the challenges. I'd love to hear about even some of the successes, like wildly successful things when you talk about this whole transformation piece, technology adaptation and change management. So maybe think about, whether you did something about change management on the forefront of bringing a change into your organization, or whether you implemented the change and then it was wrapped around the whole concept of technology. But would anyone like to share maybe some successes that you've had around HR technology adaptation and change management?
Yeah, I can. I was working at a media company a bit over a year ago, and we implemented an HR plus payroll, so full end-to-end system from nothing. And I think the winning strategy there on two parts was the hiring of an HR business partner, senior HR business partner, who had an analytics background. So real T-shaped, very deep technical knowledge, obviously in technology itself, but a very good HR practitioner. And that was a real win twofold. She had really strong influencing skills across the business, was a fabulous collaborator in a project management sense, but also change. But she also could face down the HR people who were a bit on the skeptical side, insofar as making sure that she could say, I know where you've been, and this will work because, and this is how it works, and being able to sit alongside people. So it was less telling and a lot more coaching, and that was highly successful. And we didn't have a big team. She was it. And an out there, obviously not for payroll. That's a different kettle of fish. But for the HR side of it, it was a lot of gamification. She put a lot of energy into the communication strategy. It was executed over an 18-week period, and it was planned, it was reported, and it was successful. We celebrated wins. I think that really naming the milestones and gamifying that for the HR team of, this sense of achievement is probably the one thing that they had hung on to from an achievement perspective for a very long time, strangely enough, doing it to themselves. So, yeah, I think it was that was really successful. They were really proud of the result as well.
Yeah, and I could, it's interesting how your energy as you shared that. I was almost right there as you were telling this case study, and I wrote down a couple of things. I wrote down communication, I wrote down coaching, and I wrote down celebration. And so those are three things that can be replicated regardless of what type of digital transformation we're talking about. And so again, thank you so much for sharing that, because again, that's a blueprint for success that we can replicate again and again and again. Anyone else have a success they'd love to share?
Well, I don't know necessarily about a success, but Alex, I really want to call out the very specific timeline of 18 weeks and want to raise that sometimes that's where things can go off the rails, is the rushing or the speed or the underestimating of where things can go sideways. So I appreciate that you specifically mentioned that.
So we'll change it a little bit. We talked about, Megan, you came off mute. You want to share something?
Yeah, I was just going to build a bit further. And Kristen, your comment was exactly perfect, that time frame and really spending the time and organizing. Where I've always found success with change management planning is, one, getting your stakeholders involved early, and that re-innovation process, which takes that time. And that's how having somebody strong, like in your example there, Alex, isn't that everybody's dream to always have somebody like that on a project? But if you don't, getting people involved early is critical. And then one of the things that I think sometimes we forget, even in change management, is truly understanding the impact that particularly in technology is going to have on people. And I found generally, particularly when we're talking about digital transformations that we mainly see in organizations focusing around things like automation, it's having an impact around things like the actual change in behaviors. And that's when we go back to that training, even though we assume people know, all of a sudden, like, it's going to we can replicate the data in 3 different places by using a quick command. But getting people to stop typing in that information can be sometimes the most challenging part, because that's become part of their job, or entering data has become part of their job. When we start to replace that, it'd be really challenging for them to change that behavior and then understand what they're going to do with that time saved. Or other times I found it can be a very emotional impact, because it tends to be something like, particularly automation, a replacement of knowledge or a replacement of relationships, which is huge. Somebody who's used to doing onboarding, for example, and they know they have to email 6 or 7 different people to make the process happen, and all of a sudden that's automated. And that person inside, whether they know it or not, is going to have a bit of a panic. And we need to be able to recognize those changes, be honest about it, and understand what we need to provide support on, whether it's training or whether it's understanding like, oh, your role's going to change, but just because this has become easier, you're still now going to have to manage it from multiple departments and make sure that it's continuously updated if there's changes, like really understanding those impacts. And again, by taking the time and having that patience to really evaluate each organization individually to know what's going on.
Oh, that is excellent. Megan, I was actually going to ask you about, when you think about resistance to change, to adoption of new things, what do you see playing a role in that? And you just answered that. Like, what plays a role in it? A lot of it is understanding the human side of things, understanding that behind this change and the behaviors that we want people to exhibit, there's emotions, right? There's also how long it takes someone to process something, right? Some people, they hear change and they're like, okay, let's move on. And other people, they need to sit with it. They need to understand the why. They need to hear the reinforcement again. They need to understand that they're still valued. So excellent job of like reading my mind and answering that question.
On the same wave.
All right. Kara, you're off mute. Do you have anything to add?
I'm good.
Okay. All right. So the other question I had, we sort of talked about the positives and how we've seen this successfully lay out. We've talked about some of the skill sets that as HR leaders we need to have to make sure when there's change management, this happens. We've also talked about when there's resistance, why that resistance might actually show up. When you think about different industries, because we talked about this a little bit, like knowing what's happening in your industry, knowing what's happening within different sizes of different organizations. And I don't think I asked this before, but looking across industries, what are some of the trends that you're observing with HR teams adapting and advancing their HR technology and even their analytical abilities? Anything there?
Happy to jump in again. I've done quite a bit of research in this area, and we see some pretty strong trends happening. To kind of start on the unfortunate side and then flip over to the positive side. One that I saw recently confirmed with some research through KPMG is the challenge right now, where it seems like over the last 5 years, digital strategy has stayed pretty stagnant, and organizations have gone in a different direction. And there's this, what KPMG calls it, a zombie strategy, where it's kind of dead in the water and we're not adapting to it. And the technology has moved beyond in such a rapid period of time that even for a lot of us who've been working with technologies and processing it, when the large language models came out, we were all pretty stunned at the capabilities that were available suddenly. So I think that that challenge again around leadership and really understanding what technology is available and how it's going to help us move forward and being able to realign that strategy is one of the challenges we see that's happening out there. On the flip side, it seems that for the positive, it seems that a lot of people are really keen to play with some of these new technologies coming out. So there's a push more from the bottom end of the company where people want to be using things like AI, want to be more data driven, want to have that more information. And so it's a matter of the organization being able to keep up with that demand and also help those who may be a little bit more reluctant or a little bit more behind or may lack the skills, help and support them, but also letting those who are interested in it, let them go forward, let them test and let them play. And we're seeing with some organizations being really successful in capturing on that, having really good policies that says, yes, you can use large language models, but here are the guidelines and requirements, rather than kind of going in and saying, no, don't play with anything, we feel unsafe. And that this is a great time for innovation. What we know particularly with like economic uncertainty and economic downturns, innovation is critical to make it out the other side. It's not, a lot of times a lot of organizations think it's time to batten down the hatches and ride out a turbulent time. But research and economic adversity throughout the past has shown time and time again, it's a great time to innovate.
Yeah, I love that. I just want to say this one. It's probably my own little pet peeve about AI. When people talk about AI, it's like this. It's like when someone says, "Oh, you work in HR," and they don't understand that there are different disciplines and functions in HR. They come to you about their benefits, and you're like, "Well, I can refer you maybe to someone, but that may not be the role that I have, right?" So I feel like the same thing with AI, because I've been using AI back when Grammarly was AI, right? It was helping me because I'm not the best speller, right? So when we use that term, to your point, when you talked about machine languaging, is that the term?
The large language models,
large language models. So helping people to understand, because one of the things that I wanted to ask, and it came up earlier, was, how should HR approach future tech adoption, especially when we're talking about AI becoming more integrated into the workforce? And so when we use the term AI, again, I was using Grammarly and it was integrated into my Outlook because I wasn't that great of a speller, right? But there's so many other things when we think about that broad term of AI. So anyone want to tackle that question? I'll ask it again. How do you compare, how should HR approach future tech, especially with AI becoming more integrated into the workplace? Here, you want to answer that one?
I can jump in and kick us off. I would think that as we continue to look at this specifically for HR, there are, we need to go out and we need to develop our own skill set. I think this is one of the things where if we're trying to rely on a general technology team or your IT team to help you, they're being pulled in so many different directions that HR really needs to go out and have some passion and be doing some responsible research. And to your point, some playing around and experimenting with some of this, Megan, right? I mean, being able to have that part of the conversation. And we need to be able to also have that conversation and upskill the people that we have and look at how we're designing our jobs, right? So that's another piece of how this is going to impact HR teams going forward. That transformation will definitely impact how roles are designed, and our traditional models of HR probably start to crumble a little bit, and we have to be ready to let go of some of that.
Yeah, love that. Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, I think for me, so I am a huge proponent of AI, and especially aligned with the people function. I think the people function has almost the most to gain. I think that's a bold statement, so maybe I'll say it's pretty close to that. And because you have so much of the people function being tactical and transactional, and that's of course a really important part, but most of us like to spend time in the strategic part of the people function and HR. And so AI really does allow you to be able to look at things differently. I think from an overall, if I was saying an overarching statement, it'd be that HR in general needs to lead from curiosity and not fear. And think of it as if it frees up your time to be able to focus on other things. It's not really about job elimination. It's about being able to proactively address a lot of the things that you're working on. And I think that, if you take analytics, so I'm also a big believer in data, and that, being educated with data allows you to make more informed decisions. And one of the things that we can provide from an overall people function perspective to the business is about, analytics. And with AI, it really allows you to get into the predictive analytics. So I'm seeing a lot of shift being done in predictive analytics and being able to really provide the business with, true data that can and should have a positive impact on the organization, not only for the current state, but for the short term and long term. So I think that's one of the areas. I mean, I could go on and on about that subject for, lots of different areas, but I think that's one of the most important, and really just thinking about, leading from curiosity, and HR of all functions should be doing that, holistically.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm looking in the chat, someone says, test, and I always keep a human in the loop. And some of the things that they're doing for hiring and how they're using machines. It says AI is a tool to create efficiencies, not the final solution. And that is so very important. I'm just curious, and I'd love to hear from each of you, maybe two final questions here. If you could think of a word or even a phrase, what does successful HR technology adoption mean to you? So when you think about, I don't know, for me, it means creativity. For you, it may mean something different, but a word or a phrase, what does successful HR technology adoption mean to you?
Empowerment.
Love that. Empowerment. What else we got?
I would say shifting the status quo and problem solving.
Love that.
I would say commercial. So professional commercial. I'm going to steal 2 words.
All right. Professional commercial. All right. What about you, Kristen?
And I think I'm going to get on board with your creativity piece and use that as my word.
Yeah. All right. So if we had a word cloud, I wish we could do that and we could see what the folks out there are saying, because I think those are all great descriptors. And when we think about how we are change agents, if we could just keep that in mind, and how many people could we get on board if we were to think about creativity, and everyone was to think about, wow, this is creative. Wow, how would everyone think about this if it was more of this promotion? I think that you said out. Was it promotion or commercial? Was it that you said? Yeah. And I even had someone here say enablement is a word that someone put out here in the chat. So I think we've got a few more minutes, but I want to make sure we have enough time to hear from each person on this one as well. I want to hear your advice, right? So if you had to give one piece of advice to a company just starting its HR tech journey, and you can pick the company, maybe it's a startup. And it's funny when people hear startup, automatically sometimes they think about technology, but this is not a startup with technology as being sort of the center of the organization. So it could be a new company, right? And they're just starting their HR tech journey. This could be an organization that has been in a highly regulated industry. And so now they're like, okay, we just kind of got to do it. It could be an organization that varies based upon generational cohorts. Right. So you've got one generational cohort that's been asking about this move to these new technologies. You've got another generational cohort that's been saying, let's just be a little bit more conservative about this. So you pick the company, you pick what it looks like. But what you're going to do is give one piece of advice to this company who's just starting this HR tech journey. So for each of you, again, what advice would you give?
So so for me, I'd give the same advice regardless of where, what kind of industry. I work across all kinds of industries. And I think that I see large organizations that you would think that their HR tech stack would be much further along than they are today. There's still plenty of organizations that are dealing with paper and, a little bit enhancement is needed just from an overall process perspective. But I think for me, it's really about not chasing the shiniest tool and the features. Really look at the pain points of the organization and the people whether that be a company of 3 people or whether that be, 50,000. What are the pain points? Truly analyze what it is that you're trying to solve with the technology, because having all the bells and whistles aren't always the best option for that particular company. And it's much better to start small and what's actually going to make a positive impact, and then add on to that later. Think of the bigger picture and where you might want to get, but it's not always going to be the same path. So that's my advice, is just, start with something that is going to make a huge impact, for the pain points, and start with that.
Love that. Love that. Love that. Alex, I think you may have come off mute next. Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
I was going to say, start as you mean to go on. So start, if you're starting your journey, start properly, and take the time to make sure that you have that expertise at the table from day one. And I think Cara raised a really good point. I've worked in organization with thousands and thousands of people still working from Excel spreadsheets. It's more common than people would like to think, and it's scary. Very scary. And I think that HR has an obligation to make sure that they're speaking commercially, that they can do a business case, that they can talk about return on investments. That's what I would be saying to an organization. I would be putting the numbers down on paper before they waste a ton of money, either backtracking because they've started on paper, or don't understand the wins in terms of making sure there are quick wins written down. Things like it costs nearly a year of salary, between 6 months and 12 months of salary, as you know, to hire somebody. Why wouldn't you grow them? How are you identifying talent and trying to point a picture? Because most people who are in an organization are assuming that they will be there in a few years' time. So it's talking to that few years' time. And saying lay the foundations now might feel a bit sort of funky right now, but this is where the payback's going to come. And once you've done it once, you've done it once. You iterate from there rather than starting again from scratch while you've got too much laid down.
Yeah, I put your name. I collect quotes. I always give credit where credit is due, but I love that. Start as you mean to go on. Like that is just that's like a mic drop, because so many times we build a thing not thinking about it being beyond 3 years, being beyond 5 years. And then we've got to go back and invest again, right? And get people to go through that whole change cycle again. So that was beautiful. All right, Kristen or Megan, love to hear from either of you.
Yeah, so I think that I would continue to build on this theme of stakeholder involvement, right? So how you're going through this and putting on even that design thinking lens of designing for the outcome that you want, designing for the users who are going to be using the system. And what I'm hearing, and this might be my verbiage from my manufacturing background, is that lens of continuous improvement. And that concept that we are going to iterate, we are going to continue to get better, we are going to continue to take feedback and develop, but that starting with something that you can manage and growing from there is part of that continuous improvement mindset.
Yeah, love that iteration, just like over and over, almost like an iterate to aerate. Love that. What about you, Megan?
I want to say great advice from everybody so far. Totally agree with everyone, especially that reiteration and reinnovation process is so key to really driving high-end adoption and improved abilities. And I think the only thing I would say on top of it is that you're always going to have to focus on your foundations and basics. The data to all of this is critical, especially as we see more and more changes, making sure that the data quality, integration, structure, and governance is there, including controlled access, which makes all of these processes so much easier to build on. But also thinking on the flip side of it's not just data that we're putting in the system that we're collecting, but the data that we use is like quote unquote our model within HR. So things like our job descriptions, our processes, and our policies, making sure that those are up to date is going to play a critical role in the type of data that we're going to be able to use and collect from an analytics perspective. We're going to those documents to pull information out with new technologies. And if that information isn't accurate, so like the basics such as a job description, you don't really know what skills you're going to need. So then being able to do skills management using technology, you're shooting yourself in the foot right off the bat by not having that HR process and information up to date as well. So the only thing I can add is go back to the basics, make sure your data that you're collecting and the data that you're working with is accurate to begin with.
Yeah, I love this. I almost wish I could just take us on a road show around the country for seniors who are, or even freshmen who are thinking about what their major might be, right? When you think about folks who come to HR, many of us come there by other roles that we've had, but there are a large number of people that go into the university thinking about, they want to work in HR. And so the mindset that one may have had 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, is so different. Like imagine coming out, maybe you got a background in OD, you got a little bit of a background in business, and you got a tech background. I mean, that's like the making to me of the next CHRO. So the things that you all are talking about are the exact same things that we need to be thinking about and talking to people about as they come into the workforce and begin to work into HR. I was just going to look to see what is in the chat. A couple of folks are talking about change perspectives. Let's see, the roadmap. Every HR should be commercially savvy. I would agree. Commercialization of a product is oftentimes where the sales comes from. And so if you can get those folks on board, because oftentimes they're in the forefront of what's going on from a technology perspective, they're out in front as well. So great comments that are listed here in the chat. Hopefully folks will have an opportunity to see those. I just want to thank our distinguished panelists. You all have been amazing. It is clear why you are here. I would ask everyone to make sure that you follow these individuals because they're not just saying a thing, but if you look at their posts and you look at the work that they're doing, outstanding. So again, closing comments would be just thank you to each of you. And I'll open up the mic. Anything you want to say to the group as we close out?
Just a quick comment. I've seen some of the comments and really, really insightful things that people are saying. And I totally agree. I've seen it come up a couple of times that data governance, evaluating tech, really understanding the research behind it as you're adopting, especially emerging technologies, stay on top of it.
Yeah, love that. I see a couple of head nods. Yeah. All right. Well, I hope I created a safe space where we could share the things that we needed to share and that the audience really got a lot out of this, or that the folks that are online got a lot out of this. So again, thank you all so much and have an amazing week. What a way to kick off the first day of this conference. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Love to meet you all.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to the HR Technology and Digital Transformation Summit. A big thank you to our audience that is joining us from all around the globe. We're delighted to have you here for what I'm positive is going to be a very insightful panel discussion around HR technology and digital transformation. It's a hot topic for all of us in people and talent. I'd like to bring in our panel now and warmly welcome all of you distinguished experts in all things people and talent. Hello and welcome. It's a pleasure to have you all here. I think, we have 45 minutes, so I want to jump right in, if that's okay with everyone, and have you start. Let's start with Kelly and go clockwise, and give us a brief introduction of where you're joining us from, and quick snapshot of your impressive backgrounds and what interested you about this topic.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Kelly Deanna Miller. I am an HR professional, currently working as a full-time consultant for my business, Keygenetics. And I also partner with many organizations and many small businesses in the terms of human resources, providing full HR and business consulting services. So again, I am coming from Orlando, Florida, and I sit on the board of directors for the Greater Orlando SHRM. I am SHRM certified and also a mental health instructor. So it's a little bit about my experience and my background, and I'm excited to be here today talking about HR technology and digital transformation.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. Welcome.
Hello, hi everyone. This is Sinem. My specialty, actually, my area of domain is digital transformation, and I have been doing this in HR world for the last 15 years, actually. Right now at Sony, I'm heading a global HR platform governance team, where I'm looking after service delivery, service management, people analytics, and incubating new HR services. On top of that, I'm also heading the Sony's EMEA regional HRIS strategy, where I'm working on a daily basis with all the other my HR colleagues and business to make sure that we are on track, we are doing the right things, we are aligned with our strategy and so on. So this is a topic that I have been working with for a very long time, and I'm super passionate about it because I believe in transformation, not only in the digital terms, in every term. Just before this panel, we were talking about the change management and adaptation of any kind of transformation. And I think it is, as the humans, as we change, the technology change, we are going through a different era today, and this is exactly also impacting the corporations and different domains as well as HR. So that's why I'm really passionate about this topic and really like working on it. And I'm calling in from Barcelona, Spain.
Great.
Thank you.
Tracy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tracy Spanenberg. I'm calling from Concord, New Hampshire, and it's been quite a while since I've been on a panel, and I'm thrilled to be here back again. I was a chief people officer. I was working leading HR for 25 years and pivoted about a year ago to start my own business. And I focus on advising companies in the deskless worker space, so mainly distribution, but also manufacturing, hospitals, things like that. And I focus on advisory work. I also have a part of my business that focuses on advising HR tech and AI companies. And so I love to bring those two things together and bring that future focus toward companies who maybe are a little bit earlier in their journey. And I bring my own perspective from somebody who was very, compliance focused, not that that's a bad thing, but who really transformed over the years until particularly the last 10 years to be a real people first leader. So I try to bring some of my own experience to that as well. And it's a beautiful day here in Concord, which I'm thrilled for. And on the side, and you'll see a little Disney. I'm a Disney fan, so huge Disney World fan, and that pops into a little bit in pop culture fan, everything that I do. So we may make a reference or two.
Evelyn. Hello, everyone. I'm Evelyn Reed, also known as the HR John. So as you can tell, I'm Philadelphia born and still here. I support a multinational organization. So we oversee US and Canada, and we have employees in every state in US and every province in Canada. So as you can imagine, it's chaos sometimes. And currently in the process of doing a system implementation now to synergize our systems, because we've been operating two separate systems. So we're going into one platform for the first time. So change management is a big one. Going through that now. My experience, I've been consistent with, I like to say, a strategic generalist. I'd like to dabble in all spaces of HR. My passion is tech and change management and transformation, but I've done it all from payroll to risk and safety, employee relations, onboarding, talent, you name it, and everything in between. I've been in HR a little close to 20 years now and have all the certifications, HRICI, SHRM, and just recently got my master's a year or two ago. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Last but not least, I'm Imani Carroll. I am the head of People Excellence for North America and global go-to-market teams for a SaaS digital marketing company known as Impact.com. I also have a private HR consulting firm myself, working with startup and small businesses around the US. Though Evelyn and I look like we're in the same place, I'm based here in New York City, but I have been in the HR space, very similar to the other ladies, certified in various aspects. I have my master's as well as my bachelor's, but I'm always looking for new ways to transform. To Seenam's point, HR is always transforming, so you always have to have on that adaptable hat to move with the times. So I'm excited to be a part of this panel and this talk.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. It looks like we have an amazing group of people to talk about technology, HR platforms and technology, which is huge and on my list right now. And I think all of ours as we look at AI and how this is going to potentially change what we do, how we do it, and why we do it, right? But HR platforms have come a long way, but there's a long way to go. And there are so many companies still working in Excel spreadsheets, and that digital transformation has to happen. And obviously, we have an amazing panel to kick this conversation off. So I'm super excited. I've been doing HR for over 20 years. I'm a fractional chief people officer and COO currently, but that's what I've been doing my whole life. So it's my passion. So I'm happy to be here. I do have a cold, so I may go on mute so that you don't have to hear me cough all the time. But I will. I'm here for you. So if I'm a little quiet, it's just because I'm coughing. So. Okay, let's jump into it. We don't have a whole lot of time, and I want to be sure that we talk about all these really important things. I'm going to start with Seenam, and tell me how do you make sure that any tool implementation fits well across geos, organizations, how it integrates, and with AI and new technologies that are coming in, how are you thinking about how to globally implement these and integrate them into systems that we have and have been using for some time?
I thank you, Lisa. So, I mean, that's a question that is especially global corporations where they're operating in different continents, regions, locals. This is a key topic. So, for me, I will start with something that is that we all know. I mean, basically, think global, act local. So, from a technology perspective, I think for me the most important thing that yes, we need to have a governance, global set of policies or ways of working processes But we need to make sure that our systems are able to incorporate the regional or local differences. So if we are implementing, and that's actually what we are experiencing today in the company that I work for as well. So we are implementing, let's say, workflows with a human capital management system, but that workflow needs to have differentiations based on different countries and companies. So the tools, the platforms that we are utilizing needs to be flexible enough to adjust those local activities in the systems or in the processes that we use them. Another thing for me, which is super important, especially if we are thinking about globally, that we want to accumulate data in a certain standard way so that we can analyze and provide insights on it, but still be able to act on a regional level. What we need to make sure that is we have good interfaces that are able to talk with each other in a seamless way. So here, probably I'm talking about more integrations, APIs, so where we might have our global activities, systems, processes, but we need to make sure that they are able to talk with the local systems or the regional systems. A very good example that we have experienced so far for it is recruitment on the talent acquisition domain, right? Because we are mostly using in global corporations a global tool that we can accumulate data, look at our KPIs and metrics when it comes to talent acquisition. But then your system needs to talk with the local career pages and then bring back the candidate information back into the system. So you need to make sure, if you want to think global and act local, that you have a good framework that supports the seamless data integration, I would say. And probably the last point for me that is super important, like the other two ones, is being able to get feedback. So it is not only assuming from a global set of standards and processes, policy procedures that you set up, is not only assuming that they are working, but actually really getting the feedback around it from regional, local HR colleagues, being able to collect that data. I'm not only talking about employee listening, actually, that's one step before we come to an employee listening part, where we are really making sure that we are implementing or doing the correct things for our HR teams and HR colleagues as well. And I think lastly, because you also mentioned how, I think you framed the question, you were also asking how this is linking in today's environment where we are talking a lot of AI. I think for me, it links into that a lot, especially when you're, again, thinking global, acting local, because with AI, for the big corporations, is still something quite new in the implementation, let me put it that way, the way that I've seen so far. And right now, we are just now getting the new regulations, new compliance rules around it for the last year, actually. So how AI for me is important in the overall going global versus local is to make sure that we are really compliant. I mean, in Europe, as you might know, we used to have GDPR. Now we have the European AI Act and the European Commission guidelines that for any implementation in Europe, you need to comply with. So that is a quite important step, is going to be an important step when we are scaling up different tools and their implementation.
Yeah, you made some really, really good points there that I think we should elaborate on as we talk. I mean, one of the big things is the customization, right? That systems need to be customizable, especially if you're a global team. And there's an extra challenge there, right? From a compliance standpoint, from an integration standpoint. Those are all, black boxes, right? That are hard to navigate, right? And global is very different than local, right? And there's a lot of different factors and a lot of moving parts there. And it just makes it that much more challenging, especially when you're adopting, any type of, AI transformation, right? So very, very good point. I think we're going to get into some of those. Thank you, Sinem. Tracy, this is a really, really good question. And I think that it's important to touch on, because employee experience is so much about what we do, right? And AI, we have to be very careful, in my opinion, of how we actually implement that and how it will affect employee experience, right? Through their journey through the company, right? And
Right.
I was reading an article yesterday that, while AI is revolutionizing, HR, only 4% of companies actually have a fully baked out AI strategy, right? And I think it's because it's, again, another black box, right? Of how is this going to affect, because we don't know employee experience. And we've spent the last decade focusing on that, right? And we've worked really hard, right, to make that the forefront. So I'm curious how do you determine which tools in all of this transformation, and including AI, to make sure that we're not losing that, right? And that it's still a forefront.
I think that's a great question. And I think I love listening to folks like CNM who work with large global companies, because I get a lot of influence from that. But transformation is not the exclusive domain of large global or public companies, right? And so that exists in my world, which tends to be, if you've got a one-room supply house in, Eastern Massachusetts, or you've got a 50 location, but maybe 800 people throughout New England, or you've got one location in Topeka, Kansas, right? So these are real issues, and this is a real problem or challenge, I should say, for companies all over. So everything that I do looks at things through the lens of the employee experience. And I think that that's getting a little bit easier now with the advent of AI, because my work focuses on that. I'm firmly people first in everything that I do. And technology is a tool that aids with that. And so what we're seeing now is we're seeing the ability, or we're starting to see the ability to do things like create personalized learning paths with AI. We're starting to see the ability to, basically choose your own career adventure and layer in AI all over whatever tools that you may have. Now, I think the problem becomes pretty much every HR tech company is getting into AI, but they're not all the same, and we're not yet where we need to be, and we're not yet where the European Union is, at least in the US, we're not where with regulations. And so it's, proceed with caution. So one of the biggest pieces of advice I give is, first of all, lean into your network, go to, sessions like this, learn. There's some great folks teaching AI. I absolutely love Noelle, I think her last name is Rogers. I'll look and put that in the chat if it's not. I'm following her, Allie Miller and Teresa Fessenstein on specific to HR. And then I love select software reviews to kind of dive into all of those tools. So it's, as HR professionals, this isn't really answering your questions, but in a roundabout way it is. We need to learn ourselves. We need to dive in so we can help our people, and we can help our companies make this transformation happen.
Yeah, I think that's important. The education part on our side needs to be where we start, right?
It's Russell. Sorry about that. I was Noelle Russell. She's terrific.
Yeah, definitely share those. Those are always good things to have. But yeah, we need to, pause and take a step back and learn ourselves, right? Because there's so much. I don't know if I'm the only person. I'm pretty sure I'm not. I get 1,000 phone calls a day about a platform, right? And it's just coming so fast, right, that it's impossible to get in front. Like it's just noise, to your point, Tracy. It's just a lot of noise. So kind of rising above that and getting somewhere where you can actually do deep dives and understand what's out there, right? What's real, what's still in its infancy, right? And what fits with your organization, your clients, whatever is super important. But I think that's a very good point, that we need to educate ourselves first so that we can actually make sure we're doing it the right way. Thank you. Evelyn, you're up next. Tell me what metrics or analytics or indicators that you believe are, or that you use, that accurately measure the return of investment on really any platform, or I'm going to say an HR tech stack. Let's take it a little further.
So before we dive into that, I think Ryan in the chat brought up a good point of, should we have an AI strategy versus embracing specific areas? And I think it's a little bit of both, right? Like, we need the strategy so we know what areas to focus in. And so I think the strategy is first, so we can dive into what area and cut all the noise out. And then we can dive into the different platforms within that strategy. So that was a great question, Ryan. In the timely with Tracy and Lisa's conversation. So wanted to note that. But far as ROI, when you think about a system, I think the biggest one any organization wants is cost savings, right? Like, we have to figure out, does this make sense? And cost savings can be a number of things, right? But from an HR perspective, when you're thinking about a new platform, is the administrative costs cutting down, right? Has that been reduced? Has the vendor cost been reduced? And or the bigger ones, compliance costs been reduced, right? Based on you implementing this, how is this helping you? That's speaking to your CFO, right? You want to make sure you're touching what his language is. Then you're thinking about the quality and alignment of things. So you want to make sure everything is strategically aligned. You do not want to do anything that is not in alignment with your organization, because it will flop. And it can be the best system ever. It just will not get the buy-in that it needs if it's not in alignment with what your organization is doing. And that can be a good or bad thing, right? It's just a matter of, how do you want this to be successful? So I leave that caveat there. So I think strategic alignment, so looking at the revenue per employee, looking at scalability scores. And I always preference, you should do all these things prior, so you have a pre-implementation data set and then a post, right? You want to do the immediate one, but then, do several months afterwards, so you can gauge, how are you trending? And then the several months after is tracking, how successful has implementation been? Have you had fallouts? Have you had breakdowns? I had an ERP implementation. The first month, fabulous, not a single issue. Every month after that, an issue came out of everywhere. So it's like, it was misleading, right? That first one was like, oh, we did this, it's amazing. And every month after, we're pulling our hair out. What went wrong? What went wrong? So I think keeping that consistent data points and just making sure you're tracking how you're doing, so you can if something's going wrong, or pivot, and be able to pivot a lot quicker than you would if you just let it linger on. So I think those would be my bigger ones. There's some other ones, but I think those would be the main ones to focus on if you want to continue to get buy-in from your other strategic partners.
Cool. I have a question for you. How much do you potentially look at doing betas with small group of employees to test, to hopefully try to mitigate that, oh my God, what went wrong? Still going to happen sometimes. But I do it a lot, because I want to know where there might be a problem, right? And I want to know from an adoption standpoint, but I also want it from a user standpoint, right? We may think it's great, and in theory, we talk about it. It's like, oh, this sounds fabulous. Won't that be amazing? And then actually in practice, it ends up being a nightmare, right? And
this year will be the first time my organization has took the buy-in to do that, right? I think it's after years of seeing it not successfully rolling out, we finally got the buy-in saying, hey guys, remember this one, remember that one. So this year we're doing exactly what you're saying. Like, we are doing our own UATs and validations and all that good stuff, but we've worked with our partners to be able to open a UAT platform for the user, right? So we have managers, we have a few employees, and different scenarios that come up. We made them more personalized to us as an organization, so we can test those flows versus the standard canned ones they get, because we are a bit unique in our organization, in our business. And so we set up a few we call them chat and choose. So monthly, we have two chat and choose a month. And during those sessions, there's that's specifically dedicated to those for the managers to hop on, go through it. They get their login credentials, ask questions. And then like we've gotten a few enhancements requests from those sessions to be able to say, oh, you know what, we didn't even think about that. Or this is great. You know what, let's do this. Or wait, we're seeing an issue here. You're saying it should do this. And the manager is not getting that done. Like, what's going on? But we're able to do it now through this testing environment versus the go live and figuring out all these flops.
Right. Yeah, I think that's key. It's always served me well. I mean, sometimes things still go wrong, but understanding it just happens. But understanding, to your point, how many times questions have come up, and I'm sure we've all had this during that, right? Of, oh God, I didn't even think about that, because we're one user. Like, I mean, we're using it for specific things, but other people are using it for other things, right? And they're looking to, for different metrics and different data, right? That we may not have even thought of, right? So I think that's.
And I would also recommend doing a white page if you have the bandwidth and the resource to do so. And I say that because it will give you those, past those issues that you have, right? It's documenting those, and they're showing also how you resolved them, what you did to fix them, and also being a cautionary tale for the next project. So going into that project, wait, we had these barriers. Here it was. Here's what we had to do. So instead of going into this project with these things, we can mitigate it well before we even get to that part.
Yeah, absolutely. Great, thank you. Imani, have you successfully used AI for talent acquisition? And this is a question that Juliana asked in the chat, which thank you, Juliana, and how that has affected employee engagement potentially, and also the application process. Walk us through a little bit of that.
Yeah, I definitely want to give Evelyn and the other ladies a kudos, because they've taken a lot of the ideas I have in my head just expressing it. So thank you guys for that. But I would definitely say, in using it for talent acquisition and employee engagement, to Evelyn's point, you kind of want to play both sides, the side of the employee and the side of HR. I think often organizations view HR as just HR, and we're not the employees as well. So just having that dual lens generally allows you to figure out what's going to work and what's not. And from the talent acquisition point, because there are so many different AI systems, from resume building to prepping for interviews, I've personally decided to go on the candidate end. Though I'm not looking for a role, just understanding what the system is spitting out to candidates as well as to employees, understanding what those expectations are, but also figuring out how we can keep them personalized. Keeping the people aspect in the tech itself, to me, is very crucial, because I know this AI makes everything perfect, right? But it doesn't make it humane. And that's what I really want to see when hiring someone, when working with employees and keeping them engaged, thinking of all of the humane aspects. So I recently used an example for employee engagement. We're prepping for Mental Health Awareness Month at my organization. And I went to ChatGPT, said, hey, what are some ideas for this initiative? And of course, perfection was spit out, right? But they didn't factor in various things like remote employees, hybrid employees, those with disabilities, those that have different time zones. So using it as a template, but not using it as the be all say all, because it is still tech. It isn't the personable aspect that we need to measure success. And Evelyn brought up some really great points of trying things over and over, not just taking the perfection piece and saying, okay, this is how we measure success, but looking at it and saying, okay, let's reevaluate what worked, what didn't work, and what are we really trying to get out of this through every aspect, and not only using HR individuals or peers to be your beta or your testing, but going to other client groups, even the difficult client groups that hate giving you feedback or won't give you feedback, and say, hey, can you guys try this before we send it out to everyone else? So that we can kind of put together some FAQs, but also handle the hiccups ahead of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you touched on it, but when I approach any type of transformation, or I take a step back and I look at the entire tech stack, right, and not just HR, the entire organization, right, because everything we do, I don't implement it unless it actually integrates with the tech stack of the company. That's a hard no. Absolute hard no, because that just creates chaos, right? And I don't want my Slack blowing up because people, where do we go for this? What are we doing here? That's a nightmare, right? And I don't have time for that. But I think that I always look at it from the lens of what is the outcome that I want, right? What am I looking for? How is this going to make life better, harder, whatever? But what is the outcome, right? And then back into that from that answer, right?
Yep.
I'm looking for better engagement. I'm looking for efficiency. I'm looking for I'll use AI as an example in the sense of writing job descriptions. If I find anybody on my team writing a job description without using AI, I lose it. Nope, that is no, that we don't do that anymore because I need you doing other things.
Yep.
And AI does that just fine. You know, we'll tweak it because that's part of it, but I do not want to see you laboring over a job description. There's no point, right? That's silly. So there's, you know, the outcome is super important, and approaching it from what are we looking for to get from this, right? Not just us as an HR, you know, team, but also the organization, right? And how does it also play into the strategy of AI for the entire company?
Exactly.
Right. What have we adopted? Is it just us adopting it? That's going to be a disaster, right? That's right. And we all need to be doing something in that area, right? It can't just be us, right? That just will also cause chaos. Okay, so I'm going to kind of open this up to just have kind of organic conversation around these topics, because I want to kind of hear everyone's ideas. So I'm going to move from the personalized to a little more open forum. So Tracy, you put a very interesting topic in that I actually was talking about yesterday, because I have a global team that's a lot of remote, and mobile first keeps coming up and it's going to continue, right? As we become more distributed and more remote, it's top of mind for everyone, right? They need to be able to be on their device, whatever that is, not a laptop, but a mobile device, and accessing systems. How do you see those solutions and their accessibility to support we'll call it our objectives around engagement and personalization and, you know, access for employees?
You know, I think that's a great question, and something I think about a lot because I do work with a deskless population, and while not global and not, you know, remote technically, they are generally highly distributed, right? And so when you look at, if you boil the problem in any given business down, say one of the top 5 problems, right? Communication. Like nobody does that well. If somebody does that well, I want to know, I want to go, I want to study it, and I want to implement whatever they're doing well, particularly when you have to communicate to people who are working at a desk all day. You know, my clients don't use Slack. That works if everybody's desk bound, right? So how do you do that? And so whenever, and I love the discussion that was just happening, whenever I look at tech, I look at first, you mine the tech that you have. What can it do? Like, what can it do that maybe you're not tapping into? What are those capabilities? Because your people are already using that, right? And then if you have to add something, make it easy. Get your people involved from the very beginning, and something you may think is cool and helpful, and you know your truck drivers can't use it or don't want to use it, then that's not going to work. So I tend to, and I love AI for a lot of things. One of my companies I advise is called Harriet, and it's built for the deskless workforce, and it's questions. You just text questions, and it's SMS, or you could do Teams, and you text. So anything that's text-based, anything that's mobile first, that's where I tend to look. I'm immediately skeptical if there's a technology that doesn't have some type of mobile optimization, because that is so necessary now, because people are not necessarily sitting at home on their desktops or their laptops, they're on their phone. So your entire tech stack should be able to be rendered on a small phone.
Yeah. Yeah. And so many of the tools that we use don't do mobile well. It's not something that they focused on.
Right.
I actually had a demo yesterday with an ATS system that still hasn't figured out the mobile app. It's still clunky. It doesn't, you know, it crashes. It doesn't do what it needs. And that's just, I can't put something like that in, right? You know, you need, and it's surprising to me that hasn't, that we're still there. And anyway.
Well, a lot of the big ones are older, right? And they just haven't, you know, so I love a lot of the new tech that's coming out because they're built for that. And it's just really expensive. It's easy to make it beautiful, but it's really expensive to completely overhaul tech.
Yeah. And then, you know, talking about budget and selling that to your CFO is, you know, not an easy conversation, but it's, we need to figure out how we tell that story of why it's important. Yeah, we're going to pay a little bit more, but here's why, right?
Can I jump in for that?
Absolutely.
My organization is predominantly remote and field employees, so they're scattered throughout. And so mobile first is our model, actually has to be for that very reason. And we just went remote fully for all our corporate offices 2 years ago. So it's for our whole organization has been remote. And what we found was we've changed multiple tools. So we've had tablets, we've had phones, we've had creative type of tablet, whatever you want to call it. We have all types of things. And what we found, the biggest tool though was communication. That was the biggest tool through this. And it was just getting them the information they need when they need it and how they need it, and being clear about that. And also educating our managers on what things need to be communicated and how, right? Is this a text communication? Is this a verbal communication? Is this an email communication, right? And being able to address that appropriately, because what we found is it's not that employees don't like what you said, they don't like how you said it. And so when you understand that, you can then navigate that space a lot easier with mobile first. And so at first we had managers just texting all day long. It's like, you can't have a nice conversation about performance through a text, or someone's having issues. That just doesn't work, right? And so it doesn't matter what kind of technology you get, what kind of tools you get. So I think the biggest tool through mobile first or just remote environments is emphasis on communication skills.
Mm-hmm. And what tool do you use? Which ones have you liked that do that well?
Currently, we use iPads right now, and we're piloting out bring your own devices, so allowing people to bring their own devices in on what they're comfortable for. And so our workforce is very vast. We have employees upwards to high 80s and lower to, I think the youngest 18. So as you can imagine, all in between, and varying levels of skill set, right? We have some who are completely technologically savvy, and some we can tell them till we're blue in the face and literally show them, and they still will not grasp it in that first go round, right? And so how do you navigate and manage that?
Yeah.
We've did a lot of soundbite learning, so keeping them short and sweet. Because their attention span is very, very limited, and they're on the go, right? They don't have time. It's not that they don't have the time to sit there all day at a computer, right? They're on the move, they're doing things. And so we try to meet them where they're at. Like, they're like, hey, you want me to do this, but I don't have time to do this. So we're meeting them where they're at, keeping it short and sweet. Same thing, we've created a bulletin so they know where to go when it's things about product updates or things about changes. They go there, where if it's something more generalized or global, they'll go to email for that, and do that, but more in the moment goes onto the bulletin, they know to check there and do those things. And it's still a work in progress. It's not smooth because we are also battling the issue of some technological advances that we have to, put the resources, the finances into, and it's a give and take battle, right? I think we have a good partnership with IT on it, but finance is just like, well, where's the money?
Yeah.
And then with current day challenges, should I say, it's not been a good battle, but we're fighting a good fight. So.
Yeah. Good, I love it. Let's see, did somebody go off mute? Kelly, did you go off mute there?
No, I was just preparing.
Okay. Does anybody else want to jump in there and add anything? I think that one of the interests, somebody put in that they think that Culture Amp is a great system to use for that. I think that one thing that many of my companies rely on Slack as their main mode of communication, which is a complete nightmare, especially if you're global, right? I mean, how many times I spend the first hour of my day going through Slacks from last night. I'm like, oh boy, that's not good. that's not how we talk. So yeah, it's definitely something that we need to address. And I would love to see more tools out there that incorporate that continuous feedback loop, right? That is mobile first, accessible wherever you are. So there's lots of tech that needs to happen there. Okay, we are almost at time. I'm going to put one more question out there. And Kelly, if you want to jump in, and also Sina and Imani, and then we're going to wrap it up. I need to be careful. Last time I went over and got in trouble. These used to be an hour. Now they're 45 minutes. I missed the memo last time, so I kept talking. So how do you think HR leaders can drive better adoption of HR technologies? And I'm going to let you start, and then Kelly and Imani.
Sure. Super quickly. So, I mean, from my perspective, what we talked about a little bit the employee experience as well. Right now, I think in the workforce we have like 5 different generations, or now 4 different generations. So it's really key, that part. So what I think is most important is, ensuring we are doing the right things and the complexity of the system. So we are taking employee or the human in the center and making sure that we are designing something around it that it fits the purpose. So for me, complexity of the systems that we are introducing definitely needs to be considered the technology that we implement should be intuitive, easy to use, and fitting the purpose. So once that is there, that's how, for me, HR teams can leverage that part and start adoption and change management that was discussed a little bit. Think agile in the implementation. One of the things that I really like thinking in our implementation is going with pilots. Having prototyping, just put your design into work, have a couple of people rehearsing it, see how does it feel, how does the process flow, how that would happen. So prototyping in HR, I think, is a great way that we can benefit to see if what we do is good, and a good way to convince business and to go along with the change.
Yeah, that's great. So I've just been given the notification that we're done. I can't believe this. I think we could talk for hours, and probably should. But thank you all very, very much. I have a whole page of notes here, which is fabulous. I love when I walk away with notes. And I hope all of you
share all of our resources.
Yes, exactly. Yes, please share, connect on LinkedIn. Let's keep the conversation going, everyone. And thank you again for your time. And it was great to see you all.
Awesome. Thank you all. Thank you, Lisa.
Have a great rest of your morning, day, and night.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're joining from. Welcome to the HR Technology and Digital Transformation Summit by Hacking HR. This is the last panel of the day one on ROI of HR technology investments. While our panelists are going to be on stage in a while, I request everyone to put into the chat where they are joining from. And here we have our lovely panel. Quick round of introduction, 60 seconds. Garrison, would you like to take the lead?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Garrison Gibbons. I'm the SVP of People at 21Co, which is a financial technology business. I've spent my career in the startup space, and so I'm excited to kind of apply today's ROI conversation as it relates to like a cost-conscious, ever-growing, and ever-changing organization.
Okay, given that I'm the only one not on mute, I'll take it over. Chiara Bersano, I have been serving in multiple Fortune 500 as a HR system lead, HR technology lead, including SAP in the last few years, and now I'm independent. And I advise customers and wannabe HR technologists on the next steps, including from the point of view of business case and value.
Excellent. Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Morgan. I'm the Senior Director of People at CareerPlug, which is a applicant tracking and onboarding retention software. So we're in the HR tech space. So I lead our own people function, so for an HR tech company. So speaking about the ROI is something I'm having conversations with not only our partners and clients about, but in how we can engage our own employees. And I've seen the company grow from 10 people to now about 110 people over my decade there. So have been on my own journey of speaking the language of ROI at scale as we grow.
Lovely. Thank you so much for taking our time to share your thoughts with our audience today. I think the very first question that everyone would want to know about is ROI. Usually when you say the word return on investment, the first thought that comes to your mind in an organization is a sales function or a business function or the leadership. It's rare that an HR leader would sit on the table with the CEOs and CXOs and have this conversation. So in your experience, what is the critical element of ROI when it comes to HR technology investments? Question is open to all panelists. Anybody may take the lead.
Okay. Let's get it started there. It starts, there is no HR technology investment without a business case. So the ROI starts with a business case, or should, because in many cases it gets sort of forgotten. But within the business case itself, and something that I always come in and fight for is, why are you looking at making an investment? Because that's the vector of the discussion with your board and with your management. You're not going to do an investment unless the board and the management gives you the money. And to get that money, you need to have a business case and explain why you want to make that investment. There is too much money involved. It's not going to come as a business present. So that would be my first approach. And then how you find it, well, it depends what is the problem you're trying to solve. If you're solving a problem of talent requisition and talent acquisition, well, the ROI will be calculated based on measuring what is the current quality of the talent acquired. If you're looking at accelerating or reducing number of tickets for HR, that's your measurement. But that's a problem to solve that you need to look at to find the ROI. Too detailed?
I 100% agree. I love what you're saying. And Natasha, I like how you framed that question too, because as I started my career as HR, I certainly was not thinking in these terms. I'll be the first to admit I was the type of HR person who was not data oriented, right? I was more, yeah, we need this feels good, and really didn't understand or didn't find it accessible as I do today to see that ROI. And the in for me was really understanding that it's about the story, right? And this is how my non-data brain worked. Like ROI, okay, return on investment, that just felt dry. Numbers and sales and finance, I'm not that person. But when I started reframing it, it's like,
Natalie, you're on mute.
sorry there. Can you hear me again? Okay, cool. What is the story I'm trying to tell, and how can I show the impact by that? And just like Chiara said, of what's the problem we're trying to solve, looking at it of not just what problem I'm trying to solve, but what problem is my organization trying to solve. And once I kind of took those blinders off of, okay, I'm just looking at my own data, and it's like, oh, what's the main number for the company that we're going after? Our revenue right now, or client engagement, or whatever is going to impact that bottom line. How can I back into that story and that the outcomes I can control for that? And I think that just like opened up my brain on making it a lot more accessible for ROI.
Yeah, and I think what Natalie is sharing is definitely something I think all HR people kind of are struggling with, right? Is the balancing act between what the company should do, or what the right path forward is, with also like data and or kind of ROI as a way to back up spending cost or spending money on this thing that costs a lot of and that ultimately needs to drive value. I think the good news is that because HR people are either not in a position, right, to be able to point to ROI, typically in many organizations, or just because ultimately it is not always the HR person having the end-all be-all decision making authority on these topics. Almost every HR technology has entire documentation, slide decks, presentation pointers, tips, tricks on how to drive ROI, and how they would argue in their sales pitch that are driving that ROI. And so I think the benefit for all HR people listening, I think, is that you don't do this on your own / need to do a lot of work yourself, even as many of these HR technology platforms, almost every single one I've come in contact with, has some pitch that you can make to the CEO on why you should pay for this platform. And so most of this data exists elsewhere that I think you can use for the right kind of return of investment that works for your business, right? Because every platform that you're using has a different use case for your company than maybe their end-all be-all use case that they're going forward with when they're pitching to startups of your size or companies of your scale. And so I think make sure you're leaning on the vendors as well to provide you with documentation, tools, pieces of collateral that they have already produced in order to kind of combat the argument that you're maybe needing to make internally.
Okay, I can go. Thank you. Manisha, sorry for being late. I lead HR people intelligence for Oracle, more on the product management side, so work with all the HR folks in operations. So I'm going to maybe just add a little bit twist to your question, Natasha. I think I would say very strongly, we impact everything. You know, staffing impacts your top line and your bottom line. Which company can exist without people? Like none, basically. You cannot have an AI agent running the whole company, I think, ever. So you'll need a people. That means everything we do has a very strong impact on driving the growth of the company or saving enough margins for the company. The challenge, though, is that the language of connecting what people do with financials is not been a very clear path. And so oftentimes we struggle in stating that. So my belief is, first is, does every HR person believe people impact top line and bottom line? If not, find a way to start believing it, because you're making it happen, even if you're not able to convey it. And if you don't believe it, and if you can't believe it, it's going to be very difficult for you to ever convince anybody else, right? So if you choose to stay in HR, please believe you are impacting the business. Second, whatever you see, if others are not able to see, collaborate with the right mindset, right? So oftentimes I find HR collaborating with finance and operations to find a financial lens for whatever activities we do. What is the cost of attrition? What is the cost of hiring late? What is the cost of not having the right skills for the right roles at the right time? There's always a cost which an operational leader can probably provide you. I cannot deliver this project. Okay, what will that mean? Or $20 million not, invested, whatever. I cannot do the sales. What will that mean? $18 million of sales cannot be booked. There will be an operational number which will help you tie HR activities with what operations and finance look at. And then for the rest of the organization, collaborate with these minds to help the rest of the others what you believed in to begin with, right? So it's like, again, start with believing yourself strongly. I don't think you need to even fake it because it is reality. So really, I believe everything I do impacts the business, whether it's top line or bottom line, and I have to do it in an integral manner. Then second, I would collaborate with finance and operations to maybe put some numbers in place or some dashboards, some analytics for others to see it. And then you popularize those dashboards so that everybody starts seeing what you see, right? So ROI is going to be everywhere then.
Great. And I also see some thoughts coming in from our audience in the chat. And there is a call out on AI and its impact right now on the organizations, which brings me to the next question. When considering a new HR technology, how do you define the outcomes? Manisha, I know you've covered it at the surface level. I think what would help is to understand how do you define the outcomes to influence the leadership the way you want them to get influenced, and how do you measure whether you've been successful?
Do you want me to take it first? It seems like
anybody. The question is for all the panelists.
Okay, I'll just finish my thought then. How the only way to influence anybody in this world is for us to have a deeper understanding of what makes them tick, right? Like no matter how I'm thinking, if the CFO is looking at this quarter is about margins, then you have to find a way to speak a language that helps them understand how it's going to impact the margins. Maybe not short term, maybe long term, but I think HR folks and operational folks and product managers in my team, we all have to become very good listeners and observers. So instead of just coaching on why this is important, we'll have to first listen back on what's really top of mind for whomever I'm trying to convince or influence. And then you have to somebody said the word story, you have to write the right story for you to connect your ask with whatever they're seeing, right? So for example, if a company is right now, tight margin is focus for me, then I would have some meetings, meetings before the meetings or in general meetings with the finance team, operation teams, maybe a small group of people, which is get heavily hit by attrition. Okay, why is retention important for you? It could be a strategic reason, it could be a competitive reason. First, I have that understanding. Then I will come back with a proposal on if we roll out these initiatives, maybe it's stronger engagement surveys, maybe it's some manager training, maybe it's some internal mobility initiatives, whatever it might be. I believe these three drivers will actually help you retain better. And we already know that you believe retention is important and it will have this business impact. So now your whole story is complete on by allowing me to run this initiative. So and so leaders go to achieve so and so goals. You will have a partner with you asking for that money or that initiative to be funded, right? With a very clear business outcome stated upfront. And then, imagine that you do it 4 or 5 times with different types of people. Head of sales or sales organization will have a very different kind of ask. Engineering sometimes has a very different kind of ask. The ask changes by retail company and healthcare company. And depending on where you're playing, what is the maturity of the geography, you will see the ask changing. So I think the deeper we have an understanding of what business leaders are expecting us to deliver through our people initiatives, we can tell the right story for it to resonate and influence faster.
Yeah, I would add to that I think thinking about me coming more from the startup space, right? Everything costs money and you may not need, right, to spend money necessarily to run a process. So for example, if you're a 25-person company and you need to do performance reviews, you could for free use Google Form and have people fill out a form. And so people might very easily go, why should I pay for Lattice or Bamboo HR or another platform to be able to do that for me? And then you go, well, what are you trying to get from performance reviews? Are performance reviews just for the sake of providing feedback? Because if so, then a Google form may very well be the thing that you need, right? Because you could easily provide feedback to people via Google form. But if the goal is to use data and use numbers and quantitative metrics to be able to understand where people are falling in comparison to one another, or to understand how one org may be differing from another org, You can still do some of that work via Google form, but it's a lot more clerical work. It's a lot more data entry. It requires different skill sets than maybe many HR people have. There may not be a uniform way of applying it. So there is value that's being additive from a performance platform that can do a lot more than what you may do. You might not be at the stage for that. That might not be what your founders or your leadership team or you even want from this platform. So to me, when thinking about outcomes, it's really thinking about what are you trying to drive through this process. It's not a one size fits all approach. Every company has different use cases for performance management, to keep with that example. And then ultimately, then you can decide, okay, is this worth the investment? Are we at the stage yet where this is what we need? Is this what employees want? Is this what the founders want, or the leadership team wants, or the HR team wants? And so I think when thinking about outcomes, I think it's really distilling deeply what is the goal and what is the purpose of rolling this process out. Then you're able to then leverage and go deeper of what kind of platforms can support that and what can't. And so I think that's a really great way to also just make sure that you're meeting the mark and that you're listening to what the leadership team / other people within the organization are wanting from these platforms. And that way you're actually driving the right value and delivering that outcome through whatever platform or kind of technology you end up using to implement, say, a performance review.
I think that what you're saying is absolutely relevant, and going back to the concept of why we're doing it is key. If I have to pick up on the example that you brought in about the performance reviews, there are essentially 3 reasons to do performance. One is to give compensation, bonuses, pay hikes. One is to plan the next steps of the career. And the third one is compliance. Something that, yes, Google Form can support perfectly well that, but the key part that oftentimes HR team forget is that there is a whole piece of compliance and legal regulation that need to be covered and in the US is one world. The second you step out of the US, particularly when I look at the European Union, is a completely different game. And that compliance is critical. Even if you're 10 people, you need to make sure that the capturing of the details is done appropriately, because otherwise you're up against legal and you open yourself to specific fights. So the cost of not doing something is something that needs to be included in the whole ROI calculation. Sorry, I had to add that. I'm passionate about that stuff.
I like that lens of like, I'm going to take that away as a tidbit of like the cost of not doing something should be part of that story. And just to build, I agree with everything that's being said here, Garrison. I really like that performance review example you gave as far as asking the right questions to get to the outcomes of what needs to be done. My North Star at my company, when I think about like the main people metric, is revenue per employee. That's what's most important to my company right now, is a measure of productivity, very much tied to the top line business goals, what we're trying to do in the revenue. So our executive team has, back to what Manisha was saying, listening to what they care about. I listen to conversations about upskilling our employees, about our talent GPA and how people are performing, how we can make our managers more effective. So when I'm thinking about HR tech and how to implement that towards those goals, right now we're actually redoing how we're doing some performance reviews and feedback mechanisms, streamlining some stuff. So I'm very much in the middle of this rollout, thinking about our outcomes here. And I'm trying to tie that back to, okay, I'm not just putting a new feedback mechanism in place through the software because I think we should give more feedback, right? If my goal was just, people should be giving more feedback, box check. What I'm more interested in, to tie it back to that productivity, is what is the consistency and quality of that feedback? Does that feedback translate into people actually up-leveling at their jobs? Can we see that up-leveling measured in sales quotas or other performance metrics across departments? And then that ties back into what I know our executive team and I also care a lot about. I believe shared goals, right? You're not just looking at HR goals. These are your company goals or your goals too. So being able to kind of work backwards into that story to get to the right outcomes. So very much agree with what everyone's saying here.
Brilliant. So then I would like to know that how do we create the right balance between the short-term wins and the long-term impact when evaluating these investments in technology for HR? Usually, the focus is more on the short-term wins, uh, because we want to convince the leadership that the decisions that we are taking are going to be benefiting them eventually. But I think somewhere the long-term impact or the measure of the long-term impact is lost. And a lot of organizations then wonder whether it was a right thing to do by investing in the HR tech at this point. Would love to hear your experience on this.
Yeah, and I think Kiara kind of touched on one that, like, when speaking about the compliance earlier, and I saw that there was some questions about this too, that I think is a really valid point, right? I think many companies don't think about long-term impact until it happens, right? Until an employee leaves and you didn't actually have record keeping, do you then invest in record keeping kind of thing, right? So I think being able to zoom out, so often HR technology actually supports many things beyond just the people team or the talent team, right? Like, for example, recruiting software services hiring teams. It also services compliance, legal, all these other teams like play a part in ensuring that you're checking those balances correctly. The same is true for, say, like certain times in certain organizations like Slack, Zoom are considered HR technology, even though technically they are IT infrastructure. That's just the cost of doing business in many organizations. And so I think oftentimes the mistake can be that the short-term impact is because we need to roll out a performance management platform, or we need to, have a way in which we document files. So we need to roll out Dropbox, without it actually being thought of as a long-term solution of, as this company scales, as it grows, as we change, as we evolve, with these projects that legal's working on or compliance is working on, how it factors into the bigger picture. And so I think that does a disservice, as that short-term need could quickly go away, or as things evolve, you're not reassessing it from the vantage point of, oh, that's something this solution can do. And what that also results in is that oftentimes a solution that could actually do a lot more than what it's currently offering you ends up being a one-off solution, as being seen as just your HRIS system, when actually it can do hardware management like Rippling can do, right? Or other things that other organizations could actually do that create a stickiness within the organization that makes it much harder to get rid of or kind of challenge the ROI of. So I think one of the best ways of doing it is actually assessing it end to end to really see what all can this technology do, what all are other teams, particularly in the corporate function, struggling with, what are other concerns that people have, gathering all that data while you're also assessing the technology, I think will also allow you to be able to then predict what the longer term impact could be. As I think so often you go in with an idea of what you want to roll out, you go to the vendor and you say, please pitch me this product that I need with this solution. And then you onboard a platform that you're only targeting one key feature or one key component of their ultimate technology.
I think everything good has already been said. Maybe I'll just summarize a little bit. So creating roadmaps helps, right? And roadmaps have two sides to it, right? First is, if we can, as a team and its work, write down our short-term and long-term needs. So we know exactly what we want to do right now, but to Garrison's point, and there's, I think, Natalie, you also mentioned, we have tons of collaborators. Finance, what's your long-term goal? Head of sales, or marketing, what are your long-term goals? What would be great? Sometimes ELTs, executive leader team, how do you see the company growing, especially whatever areas you might be. We see healthcare growing, whatever. I'm in retail, we see expansion happening more and more, and us going online and asking for more AI-centric tools. Okay, what kind of people would you need 3 years from now, tomorrow, 5 years from now? So if we can just jot down what our asks are going to feel like long-term and short-term, then evaluating any RFP on both short-term and long-term to do a fit analysis on where this company can help me for 3 more years versus this company seems to have their own growth pattern. And sometimes startups, they have roadmap which are so agile that maybe this startup will actually be more agile for my needs versus a bigger company might be more stable for my needs, depending on what your needs are. So if I could evaluate the long-term and the short-term fit of the roadmap for that company vis-a-vis my needs, the idea would be much more clearer on which tool to choose from the get-go, even if you're phasing it out. Another way of thinking about it is you've got to architect for the long run, even if you're releasing it in phases. But you cannot architect for phase 2 after this year is over. Let me think about it again. Next year is over. So you've got to really have a very strong architecture. Architecture changes, tool changes are very expensive changes. The rollouts can always be phased. And that's how you will get the best, I think, ROI for your investments with much more clarity on the strengths and limitations.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what's being said. I'll offer maybe a different angle at answering this question. I think one thing you said, Natasha, is sometimes that like the long-term ROI gets lost, or we're not thinking about it, and we need to balance like those short-term and long-term wins. And what came up for me when you said that is kind of looking at maybe we're even going in with, yes, this is the long-term what I'd like to do, but we don't have the right mechanism to measure it, or it doesn't become top of mind. And we need to have scorecards and processes in place so we're measuring those right things so we can report back 6 months, a year later, what was actually the ROI of this. And then one other thing that for some reason my brain heard short-term and long-term wins, and this is not a direct parallel, but went to like the Kirkpatrick model of like learning, right? When you think about what is it, reaction, learning, behavior, and results when you're measuring how effective your training was. And I'm thinking about short term is like, okay, maybe it's like the reaction or the learning, and the long term is more that behavior and results. And I think all of that can be really valuable. For example, I'm doing a project with our own ATS and our own hiring right now. I think our time to hire is too long. And also we've gotten a lot of complaints from managers that we have too much outdated content. It's hard to use some of that, right? Which we don't want to slow hiring managers down. So I've done this project to clean it up and streamline the hiring process, give them better tools, build a better candidate experience. And the short-term wins for that, which I think are valuable, are the reaction of the hiring managers. Hey, is this going to make your job easier? Are you learning how to use this new hiring process? Are we applying it? Awesome. The long term, which is going to take me a while to measure, I need a quarter or two because we're not hiring at such a high pace that I don't have enough data for it, but I'll get it eventually, is the behavior. Okay, am I actually seeing a faster time to hire? Am I actually seeing that this hiring process results in more quality hires down the line when you're measuring that 90 days, 6 months in, right? And then ultimately the results are there for the business. Are we seeing more revenue and profitability? And you can kind of break that down. But I thought I'd share that, so my brain
Yeah,
thought of
and
there.
something you said made me just think of, we've been spending a lot of time naturally focusing on like getting the talent, like getting the technology in, but also like having worked in SaaS solutions and platforms, not in the HR space, but broader, a lot of these startup companies and new technologies are pitching a vision, and much of the platform may not be completely finalized yet, or features may be rolling out on a cadence and on a roadmap that may not align to your overall kind of idea. So you may go into a platform thinking it will do one thing, it may not actually do that, or it may not be offering the value or driving the efficiency that you hoped for. And so I think creating a mechanism for the long term where you're also checking back in and going, is this platform providing the kind of ROI that we initially anticipated? If our end goal was to get more data, are we getting more data? If our input was to change behavior, is it changing behavior? And if it's not, then I think quickly assessing, a way to reevaluate whether or not there are other platforms out there that can do what you want to do, or whether or not you need to change your expectations or reassess the platform in which you're using. I think is also equally important. And so I think that also plays a part in the long term of revisiting and going, this is what we intended with this platform. Are we meeting that moment? And is this platform providing the value that we initially intended? And if it's not, then I think making sure that you make that decision relatively quickly, as we all know, changing platforms is painful. And it's a lot of work. But ultimately, it's important to make sure that you're assessing whether or not what you intended to do and what the platform you thought you were getting actually is really actually happening.
Awesome. So considering that we are at the last lap of our panel conversation, we have about 10 minutes. I thought maybe we should just pause and just reflect. And this is a question more from a reflection standpoint for the panel now. Looking back at your previous implementation experiences with technology and or the decisions that you have taken, what would you have measured or done differently now to improve the way you've been looking at your ROI for the business?
Start with measuring and keeping it in mind. Too often it is not done. If you don't measure at the start, if you don't define the ROI in the same way as Natalie was saying earlier, you have a problem, great. Now look at the metrics that are attached to that, define them, and measure them today. Because in 3 months, if you end up having with different results, you actually are on a moving boat and you don't know anymore what's what. You cannot go back and report a successful project unless you can measure the baseline, you have the metrics, and you remeasure them at the end of the project. And too often that's forgotten at the start because everybody's excited, everybody's ready to go, everybody wants the project to start. We forget to measure, and then we're halfway through and say, all gone.
Yeah, I agree. I think also really being intentional in listening to the organization, listening to the leadership, listening to individual employees about what are the right performance indicators, what are the right data points, as I think so often HR people are told what they should be. So told that time to hire is an important metric, but then actually the organization moves extremely slow and doesn't make fast decisions. So it's like, well, that metric's always going to be, as a result, not a good metric because the organization typically moves slowly and is very careful about making decisions. And that may or may not be within the control of an HR person in certain organizations. And so I think challenging certain data points to go, okay, in this organization, we care a lot about we care a lot about efficiency between one stage to another. So looking at the metric between how long are people staying in stages in the recruiting metric, maybe one that a recruiter can actually be accountable for. And that's just a random example I'm throwing out, but I think it's really important to listen to and pay attention to the type of org you're working at, and how it moves, how it works, what data it cares about, what drives the organization, what kind of culture it is. And then make sure that you're applying kind of indicators / metrics around that, setting that from the jump from what Chiara is saying. So that way you're then going back to that. But I think my mistake early on was just listening to other people tell me what HR is, or other people also tell me what key indicators are or key metrics are, without actually listening and actually applying whether or not that is true in this organization / ever going to be successful or even in your control. Because so oftentimes the way a company moves and the way a company reacts and responds and makes decisions is entirely out of the control of an HR person, or at least not solely responsible for the HR team. And so I think being able to adapt and adjust and be able to use that for whether or not something will drive operational efficiency or performance, I think makes your case stronger.
I can go ahead, Natalie.
No, I was resonating with that, Garrison, as far as your experience. I think I had similar experiences early in my career with being like, okay, that's what I'm gonna do. Great. And not, I made the mistake of not interrogating it enough, or not, like I was saying earlier, we all were saying earlier, connecting it to the overall vision of the company, and right, and where you're going, and letting other people translate that for me instead of doing that myself, which often leads to a different outcome I want to shoot for, or a different path to get there. I think another mistake, like Chiara said, not setting those measures up front, or setting measures that were too surface level, too based on the reaction, or like, hey, yep, we're going to do this tool and I'm going to measure the success by people are using this tool, or everyone got a performance review done, like pat on the back, great, rather than connecting it to what I actually wanted to do for the organization. And I think that's where that trap of people feel like HR is putting up roadblocks for you comes in, because you're not actually making employees and managers' jobs easier with the tools you're providing, unless you're coming at it from that more business outcome. How are you solving their problems by the tools you're putting in front of them? So I feel like I made that mistake for a long time in my career, and hopefully have improved as I'm growing here.
I think I made a completely opposite mistake in my life where I didn't need any validation from anybody. I was like, oh, this is the problem. This is the solution. We're going to do it. My learning is completely opposite of you've got to align. I think it pays to be very clear about what you want to do. But then HR is a team sport, right? Any operations is a team sport. So I learned as I grew up and matured that I got to align not just with my team, but the broader organization and understand where we fit in. What is the context in which I am expected to operate vis-a-vis the bigger machinery that we are trying to work together. And when I say that, it's like aligning on what success will look like. We have like L1, L2, L3 matrix, right? So you can think of it as surface level and deep level. Another way could be activity and impact level. So the activity would be everybody will do performance reviews. Or everybody will write goals, but the impact is going to be alignment of goals and better goal attainment. And better goal attainment will mean eventually higher revenue or higher pipeline or whatever it might mean. So really starting at the high level, are we all aligned? L2, are we all aligned? L3, are we all aligned? So you're having an Excel of this is what we collectively thought we will achieve. And because of that, what I need to achieve to be part of that bigger equation has to be very clear for my team, right? So I now do that. The second learning is you can be crazy, which I am sometimes, and very enthusiastic about life, but you've got to start small. So start small, cheaper, sometimes free, like Garrison talked about earlier. Great. Sometimes you can prove success with very cheaply available free tools, beg, borrow from your friends sometimes, but prove success of what I'm asking you to do. And if I've done it cheap and free and successful, it becomes much easier to get the budget to do broad and big, right? So then you can say, already proven it for this small team. Can we do the same for bigger teams? So then I would roll it out to a bigger team and then measure often. So the original Excel, which we agreed upon, it could be a baseline, but it doesn't mean it's a line in the stone. So you measure often and you reset mindfully. And when I say reset mindfully, it's both. Sometimes we are very hesitant to making a change because we went through 3 months of process to create that Excel. Who cares? Like, you can do it again. Sometimes we are very quick to change. So I think the mindfulness will depends on the chemistry of the leadership team making these decisions. But I do think this notion of every 3 months we will meet to reset if needed. And we have a criteria for what resetting will require. And the criteria itself is likely going to be agile. Those kind of things help. So those are my learnings.
Lovely. Almost at time. 3 minutes, rapid fire. Those who've been with me in the past know my style, how I wrap up. So a quick rapid fire. Your 2-word advice to our audience. Garrison, we started with you, so I'm going to go in that order now.
Listen and respond.
Lovely. Kiara.
Plan and measure.
Natalie.
Start somewhere.
Beautiful. And Manisha.
Why now?
Great. Brings us to the close of the panel. Thank you so much, everyone. Lovely to host you as always. Signing off and inviting the audience for day 2 tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Manisha.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Bye.